We will please call to order the IRL Council Board of Directors meeting for December the 9th. If you will, let's please stand for a moment of silence and remain standing for the pledge. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Those that have reviewed the agenda, do we have any additions for the agenda, please? If not, do we have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Been moved by Commissioner Smith. Is there a second, please? Second by Commissioner Mornique? Not a commissioner. Member. We're just all going to be members. Okay, let's just say we're members. Okay.
Bubba Mornique.
No, Mornique. Are any additions? Any comments? Any wish to vote no on that? That's accepted unanimously. Let's go ahead and we'll go into 3, if you're ready.
Okay, number 3, council members, is a resolution, recognition, letters, and awards. We are anticipating a letter from the Space Coast Economic Development Commission. I have seen the draft. They had a meeting yesterday, and so I've been informed by Linda Weatherman, their executive director, that they will join our investor and innovator group, and their in-kind support will be providing access for us in Washington, D.C. Through their Madison Government Affairs Group. I did have that access informally over the past year, so this formalizes the relationship. We'll put this letter on the record when we get it, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of it, but I also wanted to make sure that you were all comfortable with us having that access. In the past, they give me office space if I need introductions, and they also track issues that are of mutual interest between environment and our federal partners, both in the DoD sector, NASA, and others. And so that should be forthcoming within a few days.
Do we have comment? I think we need to return a letter of appreciation, certainly.
We can do that at our next meeting, but I wanted to make sure that you were comfortable kind of with this relationship with the Madison Government Affairs, and that you were aware that we have a new member coming on our innovator and investor group.
As long as you're comfortable, I think we'd be comfortable.
They're really great. In a similar vein, by the way, I know I've mentioned this before, but those of you who represent local government, most of you have state and federal lobbying teams. And so as we are moving our agendas and need to do information, having them working with me would be good. So I think as we move forward this year, if you're comfortable with me accessing through you and your commissions, your representation, we'll make sure we're in alignment both on the federal and the state policy issues. Thank you.
Chris?
Mr. Chairman, do we need to formalize through a motion to approve that, or I think it's through consensus without having to?
I think we were seeking just recognition of the relationship and the awareness of the availability and the concurrence that, yes, in fact, this is quite useful.
Okay, all right.
Chair.
Quite useful.
From what you said, Dwayne, would you like us to individually talk to our own
Yes.
lobbying groups and make sure that their thumbs on the pulse, if you will, wherever they are?
I think that would be appropriate. We'll discuss this a little more later in the agenda when we talk about, this upcoming legislative session and how you want to position. But I do think that would be a useful way for all of us to stay on message and in alignment without going out and having to get that kind of support with council.
Well, I think five commissions with over 1 million plus people, I think it might have some weight.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Useful. Kurt?
Yeah, I just want to point out that when I first met Dr. DeFries was when we interviewed him for this position. And I seem to remember saying something to the effect when we were discussing, when he was out of the room, who we were going to hire for this position. And I said something like, this guy's a real ball of fire. We need to get this guy and do whatever we can to hire him. And once we hired him, I wanted to put him in touch with Linda Weatherman, who's the head of our EDC. And so we had a meeting in her office, and I introduced the two of them, and I just stepped back and let those two fireballs do their thing. And so through that, we've gotten the Madison group involved, and I'm very close to them. When I go to DC, I work with them as well. And Paul Hirsch is the head of that operation, and I can tell you that they will do wonders for us up there. They have so many connections. You name something you need, and they have the person's name right on the tip of their tongue, their phone number, and so they're going to be a terrific addition. So thank you, and again, congratulations on all that you do for us.
Well, thank you. And there is no question in my mind that the reason we were able to move reauthorization of the EPA bill for the NEP was partly because those individuals were working directly with the Association of National Estuary Programs on a daily basis to make sure we had bipartisan support for reauthorization. So, you know, they were engaged informally, and this just formalizes that relationship. But thank you.
Any other comments on this? What I was suggesting, Dwayne, is that you be authorized to send a letter of appreciation.
Thank you. And we will be doing that at the end of the year to all of our investors and all of our partners.
Yeah. Okay. Anything further on that? See, we do have some public requests. Bob Stevens, please. If you would come to the microphone, and if you would give your name and your association, and we'd have 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob Stephen. I live at 150 Concha Drive here in Sebastian, and I'm with the People for Clean Water in Sebastian. I'm still working on the glyphosate situation in the city of Sebastian on the 2 major waterways that go through right by my house where the 2 of them meet. I see what happens outside my window every morning, so I guess that's my pet peeve. So we're still working on that. We've got some alternative plans coming up for the city, and we're going to approach you guys with it. But if anybody has any ideas or any other communities that have stopped the use of these products, I could use the help. I'm still working on it. Thanks.
Are we avoiding saying Roundup?
A lot of people don't like those words, yeah.
Okay.
Up north, when the boys were using the stuff on the power lines, they just used the term all kill. Because it's up to the chemist to change the makeup of whatever they're using for herbicides, and a herbicide's a herbicide. But the bottom line to me, it's an elephant in the room, along with the carbon. Now, I understand carbon. I want to go to work on carbon. I've been talking to Honda about carbon and trying to work on that, but I can't live at the house that I bought and have everything die in front of me every 6 weeks. It's just killing me. On top of maybe killing me. Maybe my respiratory is part of my respiratory problem is the glyphosate. Who knows? But I want to do something about that, and then I'll go on to the carbon, because I've been in touch with Honda, and Honda's willing to give us money to work on the carbon, and I've got some fantastic ideas, because that was my background. I was an internal combustion engine mechanic and teacher. I understand all about carbon and eliminating carbon. So, but I can't go any further until we do something about the herbicides. That's got to be done. It's an elephant in our room, and we're not talking about it. But I appreciate everything you guys do. I couldn't imagine what you're trying to do. I would go nuts. I would have to kill myself. But, you know, I think I can do this one little project, and we can show the city, and we can show the state, and we can show the world that we can have a place for the animals and the birds to go, even if the outside world is a mess. I think we can have a small section that's clean.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Stevens.
what we're working on. Thank you.
Sir. Bob Yulovich, you'd like to speak during public? Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I am speaking on behalf of Bob Yulovich, so there's no confusion as to who I'm representing today, at this moment, okay? I'm also, the big news, wow, there's like big news out of Indian River County, and very seldom do you see an event that's so significant that it can have long-reaching effects. Everybody's going to enjoy Wawa when it opens, okay? No, you thought I was going to talk about Indian River County wanting to join the thing, yeah. I'm going to talk about that too right now. So after that big news headline, I saw a little byline and it said, Indian River County flips. And man, I just paused and I had a lot of fun thinking about what to say after that. We all have been around in these discussions. Last year, I actually was at one of the meetings after, I guess a 3-2 vote is like a mandate, perhaps. I don't know. But last year we went through this. There was 2 votes there, I believe. The second attempt at a vote by Commissioner Zork didn't even get a second. I went there to commission and tried to talk to them, actually with people that over the past 15 years, I thought I had a good relationship with. I had reached out to them, they had reached out to me, and I tried to understand, and maybe my fallacy is trying to introduce logic in illogical political situations, but I tried to understand. I said, okay, perhaps you do have concerns about how the child was conceived, but the child's been born. And the child was born, I said, wouldn't it be better for the county to be in a position to help nurture the development of that child, this council, okay, if you have concerns, to be active? Well, you would have thought I asked them to adopt the son of Satan. I mean, it was terrible. I mean, this is a public meeting, it was terrible. I mean, so, and we've listened to I can't even find a word, this discussion, okay? So that, that's one side of me saying, hey, we waited at the table for you guys to come. We set a plate for you and waited and waited. Dinner's over, dishes are clean, they're put up. Thank goodness for Richard and the coalition. They came in to give a representation to a non-represented group. So we applaud them, okay? So now they have this 3-2 vote. And who's to say there's not going to be a 3-2 vote next month, or a 3-2 vote this way, or a 4-1 vote? That's one side of me. So last night I went to church with my wife, and I said, okay, maybe I need to be a little more Christian in how I look at this. I said, okay, maybe this is the wayward son that drifted off, the prodigal son, and he's feeding food to the swine and longing for the comforts of his father's home. Or maybe he looks out and he says, I'll be damned. They're doing something good up there, okay? We can really parlay this. Maybe we need to get into this in a positive light. I mean, what you're going to do today may not be right, may not be wrong, may not be good in your heart. Probably what you're going to do today is probably what the interlocal agreement's going to tell you to do, okay? But, I would like to see a commitment from Indian River County. If you're serious, you want to walk the talk, give me a 5-0 vote. Put your money where your mouth is, put your talk on the table, and come to me with a 5-0 vote showing you're committed. Because we can't go through a yo-yo relationship. If somebody gets irritated about something and they have a 3-2 vote next month or next year, and we go through all this, okay? So if the interlocal agreement doesn't give us that flexibility to deal with the ins and outs and the illogics in these situations, then perhaps we need to look at it. But you're going to have some decisions to make, and you're going to be guided by counsel on those decisions. But, I just had to publicly air my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? I don't see any other comment card. Yes, ma'am, Amy. This is about, that was supposed to have been about public comment as well, but do you have?
Yeah, I gave
please.
staff a list of all the delegation meetings that actually start next week. So you have your legislative delegation meetings next week. They start up with Brevard County and with Lucie County, Wednesday, Thursday, and they move forward. So I did forward a one-page sheet. I think you have it in your packets, but local governments, if you haven't gotten it, Kathy will be sending out to all the local governments. I thought there might be a stack back there, but at any rate, this is a really important time for you to connect with your local legislators, those that were voted in. All of the chairmen that are sitting on the local delegations at your county meetings are veterans. They've been doing this a little while. They're not brand new electorates that just came in. So, like Tom Goodson is going to be running the Brevard County and so forth. So, you'll see familiar faces. It's really important that you connect with your House members on this. And that's because the water project form is now no longer just a project form. What it is it's actually a request for a state appropriation, and it comes in and it must be created as a singular bill itself. So that means every single project will be one bill. And the only way you can do that is to have it start out with a House member's sponsorship. So that means all your transportation economic development, all what's known as TED, for years and years it had a separate form, no longer has one. All your water project forms had a simple, one-page form. All of those went in as, for Brevard County, they went in as 30 projects, all one package together. That no longer happens that way. Every single project will be one bill, and they must have the sponsorship of one House member. Do not go to your senators first. You have to go to your House members. All of those one-page applications must be submitted by your House members on February 7th. Otherwise, they're not in the 2017 legislative session. So that's really important if you're going in and asking for funding. If you are funded, it goes in as a FDEP contract, and sometimes they connect those contracts with existing DEP contracts. They add the money to it if it's on the same project. So just to give you a heads up, those all start next week. I think the first one is Brevard County. Yes, on December 16th, that's Friday, and then the following Monday, we are in Deltona for Volusia County. That next Wednesday, after the Volusia County on Monday, we have Indian River County. And then we jump into the first week in January for Volusia and, for Martin and St. Lucie counties. So I'm just saying, if you're going to be talking to people in January, you need to talk to them because you only have less than a month, 3 weeks to get it all together. And those are important requests. Last year we had a list of $328 million in projects. I think it was over 186 projects. It was a lot of projects. And it went in on, different requests, of course, with different counties. They submitted it all in. And it was phenomenal. We came out with $88 million last year in awards. And that's pretty significant. That's like almost a third of what we asked for. So this year we have a very strong delegates on our end. We have, of course, Joe Negron, who's down in the Martin County area, and he was our Senate president. And then we have Robert Cochran, who is a very, very sympathetic to this area. He's very, very supportive of this area. This is his new process. And I think it's a great process because you don't have 50 other forms going in. You have one form. And you no longer have special requests from House members' request forms. It's all one appropriation form for everybody. Everybody does the same process. Talk to your House members, and you should do it soon. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for doing some comment or question. What Amy has brought to our attention is vital, and you probably, counties, you probably have staff members that are tuned into that, but it's much more focused this time.
Right, and we do have grant writing services that have helped. Last year we wrote just on the side for some of those services. We did about 10 of them to assist local governments. Some of them were smaller local governments, some of them were large local governments. So we are there in order to help speak with your House members, and we can help with the writing and submittal of that and some of the tracking. So I tend to take a back seat on the tracking and let staff do that because my contract is paid for by EPA's money, and there's a very strong concern about lobbying, but essentially we're just talking to staff and saying, hey, what are the dates? We're not really saying, hey, can you push for this project? I'm not a lobbyist, our firm is not, and so we really haven't ever taken that tact before. We've just mostly been informational. So I wish you luck, and we're here to help if you need it.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your taking time to do that. Yes, ma'am, you'd like to speak, please. I would like for us to say Tim Zork, we're glad you're here. Dylan, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I did sign up to speak under a different item, but I just wanted to say thank you for the $100,000 grant. I'm Andrea Coy from City of Sebastian. On next Wednesday's meeting, we will be accepting that grant with a great big hug and and a thank you. I do want to quell some new rumors that Sebastian is against the sewer stuff. On our next meeting, we are proposing, Sebastian is for sewer hookup. We have some issues with the county. We are very, very for it, and we have set aside our own separate money in addition to your $100,000 grant for sewer hookup. And here is what's on our agenda so that we can quell this, what's up with Sebastian doesn't want sewer. We definitely want sewer, and we want it so much that the city's CRA Septic to Sewer Assistance Program has been offered to residences and businesses since FY 14 and 15. The program has been funded in the CRA district to hook up the county sewer system. In the 3 years of the program's existence, $70,000 has been granted to qualified applicants. With the addition of the $100,000 grant from the Lagoon Council, the city will now be in a better position to offer greater amount for citizen sewer hookup. Since there is $230,000 currently available in the city's Septic to Sewer Fund, combined with the Indian River Lagoon's $100,000 grant, staff is recommending $10,000 be granted to qualified applicants from the city CRA funds and $5,000 per applicant from the Indian River Lagoon grant. We're putting our money where our mouth is. Hopefully this will pass. We've had several discussions. We'll see what happens on Wednesday. But we want to put our money where our mouth is. Once that sewer line is down there, we want people to hook up. We want to make it so affordable they can't say no. So thank you.
Ms. Coy, thank you very much. That's Ms. Andrea Coy from the city of Sebastian. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Any other that had public that would like to speak, please? Yes, sir, please, please.
On the politics.
Careful.
I represent citrus growers from Palm Beach to Volusia County, and after the elections, I made a point of calling everybody that we supported and that who were elected into office from Congress and from the State House and State Senate. And before I could get a word out about citrus greening, which is our issue, because my industry
Microphone.
is getting beat up.
Microphone.
Oh, shoot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Before I could get a word out about greening, our issue to them saying we need financial support for greening because our industry is getting clobbered. To the man and woman that were elected, from the Debbie Mayfields to everybody that was elected into office, they wanted to know and be sure we had the tools we need to be successful with the Lagoon. It was really heartwarming from Palm Beach County and Joe Negron's office to Krista Foley's office to Deb's office. They all said, I want that to succeed and be a better lagoon. It was really heartwarming to hear that, so I just thought I'd pass that on to the man and woman, everybody. They wouldn't let me talk about greening until they talked about the lagoon.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. Any other comments, response? Joan, and if you would, come and give your name and your association, please.
Joel Tyson, I'm the mayor of Fellsmere, and I just want to encourage you all, please, accept Indian River County as part of your august group. I'm the alternate, Dick is the principal with the coalition. We firmly believe that we need this representation. We in Fellsmere, even though we're not on the river, we're concerned about the condition of the river because we recognize its importance to the economy of this area. And Fellsmere has been working with the Sun Ag people and with St. John's Water Management. We've got our reservoirs out there now, and I don't think that the runoff from the Fellsmere area is affecting the lagoon anymore. If it is, it's very little, because we got a way now with the stick marsh and the new 10,000 acre reservoir that's going in. We can hold that water out there and use it during drought time. So I disagree with Bob. 3 votes is better than none. And when I asked one of the members of the county commission why they chose not to join in with this group, and they said it was too political. And I'm thinking, we're politicians. Everything we do is political. It just didn't make any sense to me at all. So I think that that's changed now that we've got Susan Adams on there. She's a very strong advocate. I think she's being coached by her mother, so it's in her blood. So I know we're going to have some strong representation there, and I know that Tim Zork, and I appreciate Commissioner Zork's efforts and the fact that he comes to the meetings no matter where you all are, and I really appreciate that. And the other thing, I have a personal interest. If you all take this thing over, that's another meeting I don't have to go to. Thank you, Ed.
Self-preservation.
Ed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to, currently, there's only two. On Monday, there will be 3 members of the Indian River County Lagoon Coalition, but I totally endorse, as the other member of the coalition in the city of Vero Beach, we believe the county should be the representative here. And we have done this really so that our county is representative in a very important effort, but certainly our 2 cities, and I'm sure it'll be 3 on Monday, fully endorse the county taking this seat.
Thank you, Richard. We've sort of gotten a little twisted out ahead of ourselves. We do have an agenda item.
I understand that.
But we'll be able to forego a lot of that, I guess. All right. Dwayne, would you like to go forward with the guest presentations, or Chuck just asked? Dr. Jacoby, would you like on your presentations? Deb's ready, whichever. Okay.
We sort of talked about doing it the opposite way.
Okay.
Chuck Jacoby from the St. Johns River Water Management District, and now I'm going to tell you a little bit about conditions in that part of the lagoon. So a lot of this information comes from the tail end of last month and a little bit from the beginning of this month. The continuous monitoring stations are sort of in transition for 2 main reasons. One is repairing the damage from Matthew. Some of them were damaged in the hurricane. And the other one is that for safety reasons, they're being moved off of the fenders on the causeways because as the staff were working there, boats would go flying past and the wakes were, causing them some strife. So they're going on independent platforms, which will hopefully make them a lot easier to work on and provide some safety for staff. At the moment, though, the ones that are operational, probably the dissolved oxygen is probably one of the key things that we want to track from there. I mean, obviously, that's an issue for things like fish kills. So we were able, with the data from before in March from Banana River Lagoon, to give you some idea of what happened that caused the fish kill. Well, right now, good news is that oxygen levels are pretty high. So below 2, things get stressed. Below 1 and so forth, they may well die. They're now up at 6 or 7 milligrams per liter. So that's good. I mean, that's about as much oxygen as the water can probably hold, given the temperatures that it's at. Water temperatures are still fairly warm. We haven't had that much cold to drive down the lagoon. So that's good news. And that's from Mosquito Lagoon, Melbourne Causeway, Merritt Causeway, and the 17th Street Bridge. So, that spans pretty much the whole lagoon. Field sampling shows that particularly in the northern reaches, Mosquito Lagoon, the northern part of Indian River Lagoon, sort of above Cocoa, and a bit in Banana River Lagoon, we still have these very small phytoplankton, what we call the pico and nanoplankton, which includes the brown tide organism, the Oreorumbra. And they're still at that sort of concentrations. Again, we measure chlorophyll A as a way to look at how much biomass, how much of these algae there are in the water. And they're still sort of elevated above 30 and up into 50, and in patches, maybe even up into 80 micrograms per liter. A bloom condition typically would be something above 20 to 30. So there, in a sense, are still blooms out there. Things are still bubbling away. The patchiness is a little bit encouraging in the sense that you don't have the widespread bloom that we had, such as the one that caused that fish kill in Banana River. So when it's patchy, it doesn't tend to use up as much oxygen even if the bloom is crashing. But it does mean that secchi depths in some places are, you know, maybe a foot or maybe 1.5 feet, which again is not probably good for the seagrasses. In other places, further south, you get secchi depths that are 4 or 5 feet, which is more what we would expect as we go into winter when the water temperatures cool, the day lengths are shorter, and the phytoplankton tend to die off or, you know, dampen down. So we are seeing some signs of recovery, as it were, but again, it's still some patchy blooms. In general, it's been a really rough year on seagrasses, which is, again, one of the key metrics that we track. So from the transect data, you know, those, we have two sets of transects that we run, summer and winter, and there's about 90 of those. And then we have a handful of monthly transects to track things in between those time periods. That's, again, linked back to the every other year map. But the transects data at this point show that in most places, seagrass cover is below 5%. So they're hanging on, but barely, as it were. So we're looking to hopefully have a good year this next year and get some recovery.
Under La Nina conditions, are you expecting the lagoon to fare better than El Nino?
Well, I mean, La Nina usually means a kind of a wet winter. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that can be a two-edged sword, you know, because it can drive, again, more nutrients in. I think a big part of it will be temperature. I think that'll be a big part of determines how well we go this year. When we had the last winter was hardly a winter. And we also had some rainfall. And those, again, just mean you're looking kind of at a prolonged summer, which is when the lagoon obviously struggles. So we'll see.
Other comments or questions, please?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Jacoby, you talked about the patchy areas. Is that largely due to flow or lack of flow where those patches are? Are they like little coves or what do you really?
It's the patches can still be in the main stem of the lagoon. It's just that what's not happening is you're not getting the reproduction of the phytoplankton at the rate that allows them to spread over very large areas. So, you know, but patches do move around with the wind. I mean, again, the lagoon is primarily wind-driven. Mm-hmm. So, you know, one time it'll be on the east side, and the next time it'll be on the west side, and that has a lot to do with winds. And
the reason why I ask it, you know, there's been comments about aeration and opportunities for aeration. Would aeration be a possibility to at least attempt to see if that would be helpful in changing that dynamic?
I think the challenge for me with aeration is the scale. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that we've actually grappled with that sufficiently. I mean, I think aeration may help in some places, and I know it's been proposed and even tested, I believe, in some places. But the scale of the lagoon is something that's hard to convey to people. And I can't see us, quote, unquote, getting enough bubblers in the lagoon to really drive the lagoon itself.
Okay. Thank you.
I think what we're struggling with is, I believe you're giving us information that we use or we're interpreting to more clearly understand the devastation and the deterioration of the lagoon. I think when you're telling us these things, that's at least what I'm absorbing. I'm wondering, are we looking at, here are these intermediate kind of outcomes that are happening, and what now can we do as far as research projects, or what, that's where we're coming in. What now can we encourage to be happening so that we might more fully determine how can we fix this thing? I mean, we got all these, but how, really, let's go ahead.
I feel your frustration.
You up for a,
believe me, and I think, you know, one of the things that we're trying to wrap up in the next sort of couple years was that algal blooms investigation, yes, which was the surge of examining what's happening in the lagoon. We've definitely seen a shift in terms of the composition of the phytoplankton. And that, I think, is the crux of where our biggest challenge is. So in the past, you know, on a fairly regular basis, you would see blooms of diatoms as you headed into winter, because for some reason diatoms seem to do best in slightly cooler temperatures, and the summer blooms of dinoflagellates, which generate the bioluminescence. That's what we call pyridinium, that, you know, people sort of enjoy. But those are larger, much larger phytoplankton than we're looking at now, 100 times or more larger. What we're looking at now are these very small phytoplankton that, one, they turn over very rapidly. So because they're very small, they sort of get to the size where they can divide very quickly. And so their reproductive rate, as it were, is much quicker. It also turns out that some of these things, for example, it appears the brown tide and potentially this small green that we saw in the super bloom was the first time we saw it bloom, they actually operate differently from other phytoplankton. So typically phytoplankton take up what are called inorganic nutrients. Nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus primarily, that it's not tied to carbon, right? Then they take it up. That's like your fertilizer you put on your lawn, right? It's inorganic, it's not tied to carbon, because plants can take it up without having to break the carbon off. Plants are not very good at that. Bacteria do that. Well, these small phytoplankton, some of them can do that themselves. So they sort of skip a step in the cycling of nutrients, which again means that the cycling is much more rapid. You don't lose as much, because every time you cycle nutrients, you sort of lose some percentage, a leaky system, a leaky process. We're not seeing that anymore. So the blooms we get tend to be larger in magnitude because the phytoplankton reproduce more quickly, there are more of them, and they tend to last longer because they don't spin down as fast. I mean, diatoms typically crash because silica runs out. They need silica for their outer shell. Dinoflagellates also, you know, they are large and they consume a fair amount of energy, so again, they don't tend to last as long. These small ones seem to last much longer. And I think that's where we've seen the change in conditions. So again, we don't have any strong evidence that there's a change in nutrient inputs. It's just the way they're being used in the system. And so you're correct. One of the things that we need to move on from is, you know, kind of our old view of the system to a new view of the system, and look for those places where we may be able to make changes that help.
Because it seems to be what we are resolving is that the basis or the foundation of the ecosystem is changed such that these responses, as you've suggested, are more intense, and even with the same level of inputs. Is that incorrect?
No, I think that is pretty much correct. I think the other thing that we've seen that started us on this pathway was a conjunction of events, as it were, meteorological events, nothing that people did, but, you know, cold winters, low rainfall, high salinities, a variety of things that, again, shifted the way nutrients were being used in the lagoon. So one of the things we're driving for is to try and gain a better understanding of this drift algae, which everyone knew was there. Some people had spent a little bit of time on, but nobody had spent that much time on. But now we're thinking that, you know, the interplay between the seagrasses, the drift algae, and the phytoplankton is really important to determining how any nutrients that get in the system are processed. And it's that interplay that we probably need to be able to explain better to then see where the management interventions may be best placed. Perhaps we can even, you know, harvest or farm or somehow use drift algae to help us. But drift algae plays a role in the system. And again, you don't want to go in and tinker with a system until you have a pretty clear idea what the outcome may be, because you may make it worse, not better. So that's what we're working on, and those are the kinds of things that we're trying to do, you know, with further investigation. We've learned things about the lagoon we didn't know before, and we're trying to understand those. So collect data, take data from various sources, synthesize those data into information, take that information, bump it up against the bits of information up against each other, generate some knowledge, some explanatory power, and then hand that to the managers and you folks to then fuse that with what can we do and come out with some wisdom about how to fix the lagoon. That's the process we're in, and it is, I think it surprised a lot of people, and it is a challenge. And overall, broadly speaking, I think it's taught me that we need to think about events when we manage nutrients. We tend to manage nutrients to the averages, and that probably works most cases, but events can really surprise you, and we somehow have to factor that in. So in the future, I think we'll do a better job by learning about this particular set of events.
Well, we very much appreciate that you are taking the role of heading up the STEM committee, and I think that's essential, your input in helping us, and John, who's got 500 years of input, that as we try to ferret out what in the world the complexities are, because the outcomes are different than we would have expected. But anyhow, thank you very much. Other questions, please, for Dr. Jacoby? Any other questions? Chuck, thank you, sir. Ms. Drum, please. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Deborah Drum, Ecosystem Manager with Martin County. I typically don't do slides, but what I would like to do today, since it's December, is sort of put a bookend on what we've been experiencing this year in the southern part of the Indian River Lagoon and the very dramatic news story of some of the algae and some of the conditions that we've had down there. So I'll get right into it and try to walk you through these slides relatively quickly. This is a different iteration of a presentation that I provided to the Martin County Board of County Commissioners this past Tuesday. Just to give an overview, these are the basins that are in the St. Lucie Estuary drainage basins. This comprises about 525,000 acres, 625,000 if you include the C25 basin. So this just gives you an idea. This is Martin and St. Lucie County. This is where the water leaves Lake Okeechobee and through this structure at S308 goes down the C44 canal, and at S80 that's where it enters the South Fork of the estuary, and that's where a lot of the news that you get about freshwater releases from the lake, there's where that starts. The biggest news in water management right now is that we have the driest November on record from Orlando to the Keys since record keeping began in 1932, and that follows on to the wettest conditions that we had in the month of January. And so within the same calendar year, you've got these extreme conditions, the wettest and the driest conditions since record keeping began in 1932. That really underscores the challenges of water management in the system and how managing in the extremes are really appreciated. What Chuck just said about managing events as opposed to looking at averages, because this is the year that tells us that averages don't mean much when you're talking about the kind of nutrient input that's associated with the kind of releases that we saw. So we are in a very dry condition right now. We're about over 2 inches below average district-wide of rainfall. And this is just something to keep an eye on. We went through a very extreme wet condition, and now we're in a very dry condition and looking at water supply issues. The current conditions, the lake is currently at about 14.7 feet. That was yesterday. About a month ago, it was 15.26 feet. You can see that recession. The inflows to the lake are much less than the outflows. The outflows this time of year are very much associated with water supply needs, which is different from the wet season. That's really trying to get water out of the system that's in excess. It's trying to get water through to the Everglades. And just to, again, I wanted to put a bookend chapter on this year. The 2016 discharge event began January 29th and ended on November 4th, and that was 280 days of releases to the estuary. That equated to 220 billion gallons of water from the lake and 53 billion gallons from the C44 basin. But there's a different story to be told. This is the event. There's a different story to be told if you look at the average inflows into the St. Lucie Estuary. So if you look at this part of this pie chart from Lake Okeechobee, average annual inflows from 1995 to 2016, what we've seen for the period of record is basically 30% of the flows that go to the St. Lucie Estuary are from Lake Okeechobee. 70% of the flows come from the local basins, meaning the C44, C23, 24, and 25, and 10 Mile Creek and the coastal tribs. So what's interesting about that portion of the pie chart is that Indian River Lagoon South, the CERT project that you often hear referred to, was born from this fact that most of the damaging flows to the estuary are coming on average from the local basins. And that project is designed to capture that local runoff, hold it, retain it, clean it, and give it to the estuary if it's ever needed, or be available for water supply needs. So this really tells the story of how that CERT project was born, is that 70% of those flows are extremely significant to the estuary, and by managing those, you would have a huge improvement to the conditions. However, this year, this graph could be completely, and is completely flip-flopped, where 70% of the flows that came to the estuary were from Lake Okeechobee in an extreme discharge year, and 30% came from the local basin. So you can see the complexities of where events are important in this system. I'm going to quickly go through these. The nitrogen loads to the St. Lucie, again, for that same period of record, 30% from the lake. It pretty much follows the flow pattern there. The phosphorus loads, a little bit less from the lake, a little bit more from the basins, which is probably telling the story of some of the land uses in those basins. But this really tells a story. The total suspended solids, and we saw this year, where we had extreme turbidity, extreme high levels of total suspended solids in the estuary during the lake discharges. And it really put a hammer on what we were expecting to see with seagrass and oyster restoration. So this tells a very important part of the story in terms of where we might need to focus on some remedies to try to reduce some of those total suspended solids. There's some ideas of maybe how we can do that within the watershed in a more effective way before that water goes through that S80 structure, and figure out how we could maybe improve that situation. The salinities, these are from when the discharges started at the beginning of this graph down to current, and you can see we had pretty low salinities. What I want to note here is that this is at the top of the water column, and fresh water is less dense than salt water, and so it floats on top of the salt water, and so you get this wedge of salt water. And the communities that we're managing for, oysters and seagrass, are at the bottom, so the bottom salinities are a little more telling for us in terms of how the estuary is doing. What we noticed this year is that the top salinity, look at 20 right here across this, is 20 parts per thousand. You can see that we were below that. We were below 10 for most of the time, and that put us in a poor condition. But this was at the top of the water column. In contrast, for that same period of record, look at the salinities for the bottom part. They're much improved. You can see that we had those higher salinities. We did see that water column stratification with that lens. And so you can see that at the bottom, you had a little more salinity above the 10 line here. What we did see and what we think happened is a couple of things. The Army Corps of Engineers had managed their water in a pulse release fashion. We do think that that helped retain some of those bottom salinities and kind of retain some of the striation that we saw, the stratification that we saw, to allow those bottom salinities to stay maintained, as well as the Water Management District really reduced the risk to the Corps by holding more water in the Kissimmee this year under some really preliminary operations looking at Kissimmee River restoration. So a combination of factors. What I think we saw is that we try to eke out every single bit of improvement that we could, no matter how small it seemed, and it might have made a difference. What we're seeing is that this green range here is the preferred range for oysters. We were below that green zone for much of the year. We've kind of recently moved out into a preferred zone, but it might have been enough to get the salinities and the pulse releases might have been enough on those bottom salinities to really help the oysters. And so the Florida Oceanographic Society has made some recent observations in the Stuart area and has actually seen healthy oyster clusters that were not expected after an event like what we just saw this year. And so that's why we're attributing some of these more innovative water management practices. Maybe collectively they might have made a difference. So they are seeing some healthy oysters in the Stuart area. So we're thinking that we might see some recovery now with improved conditions, not this time of year, but when we get further into the spring, we might see that. And this also tells a story, again, when the releases started and where we are currently, the temperature issue. Right here, this end of June and July timeframe, temperatures got above 30 degrees Celsius, over into the 90 degree Fahrenheit range. That is when we saw an absolute explosion of the microcystis algae. That's where so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on temperature as a trigger as we move forward and into next year, wondering where all the microcystis went. Is it encapsulated in cysts, as I reported to you at a previous meeting, as a potential, and seeing if how much of a trigger we see at certain temperature thresholds. So our planned actions as we move forward, we are having discussions with academia and with, we'd like to set up some meetings. We've met with some of the federal agencies and set up some meetings with the state agencies to develop a monitoring plan, which is currently unfunded, for the next blue-green algae bloom, using the lessons learned that we know about threats to human health and what the impacts are to environmental health. There was just not a really good monitoring strategy put in place. That was not, we did some ad hoc responsive due to concerns with health. We did some air quality and some monitoring of water quality sort of in the thick of the mat, and I've reported on those to you throughout the year. So we would like to be more thoughtful in moving forward and cooperation with the state and federal agencies. We've met recently with the EPA, finding out how we can better, corral some of their resources in an event like this. The statute and the legislative, the statutes is there to allow funding to go through both at the federal and state level to get that kind of support. We would like to see more of an emergency response kind of, like you would respond to a hurricane, in those events. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions, and I thank you for all of your support, throughout the year as we were going through this event with your shared concerns, and for the opportunity to brief you on those items.
We have questions for Ms. Drum, please. She certainly is our expert on this, so we want to take advantage of her being here.
I'll be here next time too.
Those that enjoy oysters, and that's good, but that's not really our focus. That's not really why we're so jazzy about oysters. Each one of those little jobbers can filter 40 to 50 gallons of water a day. And in that filtering process, they can absorb and take these nutrients out of the water. That's the essence of our push. And maybe one day we can have oysters as a marker species. I've tried to ask for that and been told it's futile, but anyhow. And the seagrass, they go in tandem. And Chuck is studying some things that I think are going to help us be more progressive in addressing these problems, because they are problems that seem to be not as directly associated with our observations as we would like for them to be. I think you're getting into areas that are going to help us be more effective in our, so that's questions, please, comments?
Okay, thank you very much.
You super good. Very well. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We have Eric Harvey and Herb Hiller that are here, please, and you'd have a presentation you'd like to make about Indian River Trail concept. If you would, state your name and your associations, please.
I am Herb Hiller from DeLand, Florida. I'm an ecotourism consultant to the Space Coast Office of Tourism. I'm introducing the presentation that will be made by the Executive Director of the Space Coast Office of Tourism, Eric Garvey. We learned earlier this year that the lagoon was hurting, the economy was hurting. We learned of fish kills, king tides, closed beaches that were devastating coastal tourism. The Space Coast Office of Tourism brought together a small group that included Dr. DeFries and me. Together with Mr. Garvey, we formulated the plan that the letter in front of you in your packets represents. The essence of this 5-county plan is the collaboration between 5 destination marketing organizations and more than 40 environmental and heritage education centers that concentrate along the 156 miles of the Indian River Lagoon littoral. If you average that out, that's 1 environmental education and/or heritage education center for every 4 miles. No such concentration exists anywhere in Florida. And the bunch together represents not only a resource base for helping the IRL NEP in its work, but they also represent tourism assets for in-state and global visitors who increasingly want to know about when they're visiting a place, where am I? What's going on? And if there are problems in the area, we're facing a much more proactive wedge of travelers today than we had before. They want to know, and they very much want to be helpful. And so the proposal in front of you from the 5 IRL counties working collaboratively represents an exceptional convergence of conservation and tourism that have not always lived happily together, but uniquely in this situation can help model Florida's future. Thank you very much. I'm happy to introduce Executive Director of the Space Coast Office of Tourism, Eric Garvey.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Herb. Yeah, I'm Eric Garvey. I'm the Executive Director of the Brevard County Tourism Development Office, otherwise known as the Space Coast Office of Tourism. And thank you for your time this morning. The Brevard County Office of Tourism, when the issues of the lagoon became of crisis magnitude earlier this year, began a discussion about how the tourism industry can support restoration efforts of the lagoon. There's a bit of frustration in that the tourist development tax is a restricted revenue source which is not allowed to be used for water quality issues. So as we began to deliberate about how we can participate, this concept of supporting the healthy lagoon through the environmental education facilities along the lagoon, that concept rose to the top. And as we look at a map, we clearly see that this is an opportunity for a collaboration amongst the 5 counties and the tourism organizations within those. So we reached out to my colleagues in each of the tourism development offices in each county and have secured participation in developing this concept. And what we're here today, this morning, to do is to ask for your support to engage with us, for us to formally partner with this organization to develop this concept more fully and deliver it back to the marketplace as a full promotion and support program for the Indian River Lagoon Estuary. I've had some preliminary conversations with Visit Florida, the state tourism organization, and they have expressed their interest in also participating with us. And I think we can bring together this region and partner with Visit Florida as well to really create a robust program. We expect to fully, for the tourism organizations to fully fund this program. And we also want to begin at the beginning, which is start working with this council, with the local stakeholders to develop the concept, not making any assumptions about what this thing should be. So I'm sure all of you have been exposed at some point to some kind of trail concept Personally, I like the Robert Trent Jones Golf Trail in Alabama, but there's wine trails, and there's many forms of this idea, and I'm not here to advocate for any of those this morning, but simply begin at the beginning to look at what we can do, partnering with the council and developing this program which would support a healthy Indian River Lagoon. So that's the essence of what we're here today to ask you for. Like I said, the next steps would be to gain your support, begin talks with all the stakeholders that would be involved. We hope to engage a creative marketing firm to help us take these ideas and make them real and develop a program that's appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish. So with that, I'll leave you with that request, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Garvey. And you might note there is a portion of your agenda that's a copy of a letter to Director DeFries, and it is from each of the county tourist organizations. And so the county commission members will recognize people on here. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Eric, Mr. Hiller, we met a while back when you presented at the Tourist Development Council in St. Lucie County some time ago. I would like to be maybe the first group to engage with you, since we were the generous recipients of multiple grants to connect 5 trails within St. Lucie County. We have also hired and merged TDC, our Tourist Development Council, with our mosquito control and our environmental resources coordinators to take all the assets. We have now over 11,000 acres of preserves and conservation land, and we're developing with this individual a tourism, marketing, and education component, including greenways and trails, as well as the paddle trails, all of which we're combining all those assets. We currently have the ability to connect to Martin County through the southern section of the Savannas, and we also have connection points through the North Savannas. So I would like to engage you to come to St. Lucie County and work with our new representative who's working with mosquito control, ERD, and tourism to develop maybe some of those aspects and assist in that process. And I think we could speed that along very quickly, because we do have significant grants, 5 individual grants that will connect 5 separate areas. So I'm willing to offer my assistance, whether as the chairman of the Tourist Development Council or as the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, to assist you in making that foray.
Fantastic. I'll take you up on that. Sounds like you already have the beginnings of a working model that we may be able to look at expanding across the region. So that's great. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Other comments, questions? Dwayne, did you have, excuse me. Actually, yeah. Dwayne, you?
I'll defer to the
Okay.
chair and council.
Yes, sir.
Okay, this looks like a very exciting opportunity. I'm just wondering what the next step is for us on this. I mean, work with has lots of different.
That was going to be my suggestion. I'd actually like a motion on this. The motion would be kind of a multiple phase one. Number one, provide authority for me as executive director to sign any letters of support that they might need as they, seek funds for this. And basically, we would be endorsing the Indian River Trail concept. So a first letter of endorsement, but if they write proposals, if they seek funds at Visit Florida, that we would provide a letter of support in those approaches. And number two, provide staff time as needed to help them kind of connect, because most of the partners on this trail are folks that are either seated within our management conference structure or close friends with the NEP, and so we can help that engagement as this concept moves forward. And just as a thought down the line, as this moves to the point of branding and consideration, I would love to see our contract with ideas, make sure that our branding efforts for the NEP are working closely with the tourism agencies to make sure we're co-branding and we have alignment, because this industry is not only just important to the lagoon, but the lagoon is important to this industry. So those 3 things, that we just engage fully with this effort as needed, and also to provide letters of support starting with an initial one for the concept.
Chair, I would like to make a motion that we provide Dr. DeFries and his staff the authority for letters of support and to provide staff time as needed with TDC agencies. Does that pretty much cover it?
Second.
Yes, it does.
Okay, but we do want to have that coordination as far as the effort, the branding effort, because that is an essential element. What we're talking about, it'll be good for you guys, but it'll also be good for us as everybody's looking for funds, and that'll be mutually useful. So that.
And just as one last point for the record, this presentation was given yesterday to the Combined Management Board and STEM Advisory Committee and endorsed by both.
Good, good. Kurt, is that okay to add that?
Absolutely.
To amend?
Second
Kathy,
concurs.
did you get that amendment? Okay, it's been moved by Member Smith and seconded by Commissioner Zadowski. Is there further comment? Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, I just think that you could expand this to so many clubs. Yeah, living in the area, there's bicycle clubs that bicycle from Jensen Beach all the way up to Cocoa Beach. They do a 50-mile loop. There's motorcycle clubs. They do the same thing on motorcycles that go along in your drive, go over on A1A. They come back. There's trail after trail after trail because of the lagoon and the beauty of it. And they stop at Earl's Hideaway. They stop down at Jensen Beach at a place there. And there's so many trails because of the lagoon. I think you can expand this into a lot of clubs and have them support it and grow it from there.
Great.
I think it's a great idea.
Great, thank you.
Mr.
Chair.
Yes, sir, please.
So, and I agree with everything Doug just said, and it is something that's critical for the lagoon and the lagoon communities. I want to make sure that we govern, or, that Dwayne is mindful of his time, Frank's time, Kathy's time, because our primary focus is the ecology of the lagoon and restoring the lagoon. There's no doubt that it's interconnected with the visitation and the enjoyment of the lagoon, but we just need to make sure that we don't spread ourselves too thin. I'm going to support the motion, there's no doubt about that, but I just want everyone to be mindful of the staff time.
Useful observation. Thank you, sir. Other comments? Is there a comment from public? Does anyone wish to vote no on this item? That's accepted unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking time.
Mr. Chair.
Heller, thank you. Mr. Heller, thank you, sir, for coming to see us. Yes, sir, please.
Along those same lines, one of the things that Brevard County is asking our delegation to do when they go to Tallahassee is to attempt to free up some funds from the TDC to be used for estuaries like the Indian River Lagoon. And I would encourage my fellow commissioners to do the same, to bring up to your commissions, because right now it seems to me, and I think to a lot of other people that have thought about this, odd that a tourist development corporation or organization can't direct any funds to the Indian River Lagoon or any other estuary that are clearly very, very oriented toward tourism. So I think it just makes sense that we give our legislators that word, that we encourage them to free up the TDC to make those decisions that could benefit something like a tourist magnet like the Indian River Lagoon.
Mr. Chair, as the Tourist Development Council Chair now for 5 years with St. Lucie County, can I ask how do you think funds should be directed in a manner of promoting the lagoon or trying to do projects in which to clean the lagoon? Because there's really a different path for the Tourist Development Council in revenue spending. So if I could understand better what your thoughts are.
Well, my purpose in bringing this to our delegation is to just free up the TDC to make those decisions, because yours may make decisions differently than ours. You may have different needs or different wants than ours. But right now, they're totally restricted because somehow the legislators, when they came up with the rules and regulations and the parameters for the TDC to disseminate money regarding tourism, didn't think that the estuaries like the Indian River Lagoon were tourist magnets. And so I just think it should be, we should leave it up to them. But that's my thought.
I'll just share that how St. Lucie County is set up. You know, the first 4 cents basically go to the New York Mets for managing the stadium. The remaining is actually funding the office and doing the actual promotion. And just to give you an idea, although kind of an aside, we did promote the Southern Kingfish Association tournament. We also assist in creating artificial reef programs and things like that. So we are actually promoting the bringing of people to the community to enjoy the lagoon. So we do advertise and talk about the value of what the lagoon is about. So from that standpoint, I think each TDC has that ability. We are limited, and we do have a small portion of what we call the North County penny that actually goes for capital projects. We've just expended $780,000 for the seal expansion to kind of like diverse those revenue spending, and we did a $2 million expansion of the bonsai gardens at Heathcote Botanical Gardens, of which $145,000 was used as a match to help them. And then most recently, a $400,000 grant to the Bacchus Gallery for an expansion. So you can see how tourist development is diversifying that approach in bringing tourists to our community, all of which, as a matter of fact, are very closely connected to the lagoon. So each one of those entities has that connection. So from that standpoint, that's what, just as a FYI, as to from what my experience has been. So if it's helpful.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I tend to see more strongly your perspective, and that I'd like for us to have more flexibility as well. And that's, any other comments on this? Ms. Brant Williams, we look forward to your presentation, please, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, the down arrow.
If you would.
Okay. So I'm Sherry Brant Williams, and I'm with the St. Johns River Water Management District. And I'm here today to try to engage the IRL Council in joining us, the district, in the ongoing planning process to evaluate the use of oceanside flushing in a pilot project to see if there's, what kind of impacts, good or bad, that we might see to the lagoon. So I guess I am actually going to be asking you to join later on at the end of the meeting, but right now let me just walk through what our current plans are. We all know that the lagoon needs some help, and the district the priority for the district will always be watershed loading to the lagoon. We know that most of the damage has come from the increasing developed areas. This is a picture from you see this, right? From the 20s through the 40s, you can see that it went from almost no development to completely developed by the 1990s. But what you might not know is, I mean, you do know that a lot of the drainage from the Melbourne Tillman Water Control District, a lot of canals were put into place, and it redirected the water out to the lagoon along with Lake Okeechobee, which is outside of our district. But the historical watershed was 572,000 acres, and it's currently over 1 million acres of drainage. So drainage has increased 146%. That's a big deal. So I'm just reiterating that we know at the district that the watershed is the big deal. Again, you know, loss of wetlands, you don't need to probably be told all of this. You've seen these maps probably, but it's important enough for me to keep a single slide to remind you that although we're asking you to help join us in looking at a flushing project, we are not losing our priority or our commitment to watershed loading. We know we need to keep working on that. And to that end, as you know, we have, along with the Army Corps and other agencies, have instituted a significant amount of water storage, put it back onto the watershed, and trying to redirect it away from the lagoon. We are still adding projects into this. which I'm not going to go into today, but I just wanted you to know that we are doing a lot of work in the watershed, and we continue to do work in the watershed. We also help a lot of local areas with smaller water management projects, and we are also helping with the legacy loads through the dredging projects that we cooperatively fund. So with all of those watershed projects moving forward, we now have a little bit of time and a little bit of money, not a lot, that we would like to put towards assessing impacts from oceanside changes. This is a picture of 1944 Hutchinson Island. One little tiny house right there. A lot of overland ocean washing ability. There's just nothing there. And of course, I don't have a picture to show you right now, this same viewpoint, but I don't think I need to tell you that Hutchinson Island doesn't look like this anymore. So actually a couple years ago, we were approached by some groups, and we internally were trying to determine whether we needed to be looking at flushing, and we hired a consultant to look through the lagoon in our district to find some locations that might be the most conducive to looking at impacts of different levels of flushing that might actually make a difference on the lagoon. Not to say that these are the sites that we are going to work forward, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that coming out of that study, the Port Canaveral area was identified as probably the best area of the time within the district, within the St. John's district, to do some inlet-outlet kinds of studies. We are at the point now where we are going to start looking at other areas outside the district, but just looking at those two sites that I just showed you, we did some simulations to show that residence time under existing conditions it's about 400 days for residence time. It's a very long residence time. But by doing some of the flushing that we're looking at, we can reduce that to less than 200 days, which is still pretty long, but still, the shorter you get your residence time, the less likely you will to have algal blooms. I didn't want to put a whole lot of graphs up here, but the salinity also shows improvement and moves the salinity into an area more conducive to oyster habitat. So getting to the meat of what I want to talk to you about today, our approach is, at the moment, we're working by ourselves. We have funding to do a preliminary feasibility assessment. We are looking throughout the entire lagoon, all the way down to the bottom, not just the part that's within our district. If a project is identified and at a reasonable cost, we will start reaching out to other folks for funding. We were approached by other groups to help support, and we would like to do that, but we really aren't going to be the primary funding agency. We're just trying to get the ball rolling and seeing what the most feasible projects are from a scientific standpoint. If the project's funded, of course, we do have extra money then to continue base monitoring as soon as whatever group we've pulled together has decided on the site that they would like to do the test at. We are asking for a one-year pilot study rather than a short-term one because we want to make sure that we can see all the impacts that might happen, both good and bad, and that we think short-term projects aren't going to do that for us. We will assist in competitively procuring all of the work that's required to move that project forward, including the management of the monitoring and modeling and everything that happens throughout the year that the study's in place. So what we're looking for is partners, both funding and planning. We're currently thinking about working with the IRL Council to perhaps use some of their funds from the state. We're looking for other legislative funds, and of course DOT is planning in certain areas to do mitigation, doing projects that they need mitigation for. So that might help weigh in on where we choose to actually do the pilot study. But what we want, the people that we want to have come to the table as our partners are the IRL Council, specifically Dr. DeFries. We've already touched base with the Port Authority. They're willing to give us a couple of people to partner in the choice. We're going to be getting in touch with the Army Corps of Engineers and trying to bring them on board, and of course then there's us, of course, the St. John's District. If a site happened to be further south, we would want to bring South Florida Water Management District onto the project. And that's actually all I am prepared to talk to you about today, but if you have any questions, there's my email address, although I would like some kind of formal declaration that we can continue to work with you as we move forward into the planning process.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I don't know that we need a motion for this. We have already been working together with our partners and will continue to do so. I do want to applaud the district. This has been an issue. Drew and I were in meetings going back to the fish kill in March, and so the district has proactively put science before the big question of pilot study, and so I'm really excited to see what these preliminary studies. I was in the meetings at Port Canaveral. Bob Musser, our management board member, was in that meeting. We actually talked to Corps of Engineer, but I know you are all very concerned about staying in the lane, and so if you so choose, I wouldn't mind a motion, to continue to work. But normally, these issues are coming up on a day-to-day basis. You hired me as an executive director to time manage. I think we're doing that pretty well. We're juggling a lot of balls, but we haven't dropped any big ones yet. And so if you feel so inclined, a motion would be great, but this is going to be an important component of our CCMP process. The data that comes out of it will drive some of the next steps, both direction, and scale. And so we would be doing this as part of our normal business in the implementation of what will be our revised CCMP.
Would this be, and would this be tied in with STEM and their evaluation? Are they at that point of being interactive, or where are we?
Yes, in fact, Dr. Sherry Brandt Williams gave this presentation to both the management board and STEM yesterday. They voted favorably. There are concerns among some scientists about just the whole concept of flushing, and we've all heard those concerns, and I think we all share that, with really large, expensive kinds of projects, we need to take care that we're doing the right thing. And so, in a way, this feasibility study that the district has taken on is a way to get some science so we don't rush to some project that may not provide the kind of remedial water quality action that we anticipate. And so, yes, we be fully engaged as a management conference with our district partner in this.
That's more specifically, that's what I was asking. Would Dr. Jacoby and those that are under that group, would they be more closely associated? Would they be involved in, I think you're saying we're talking about sort of thinking this thing through before we start digging ditches or something.
Exactly. So, this feasibility study will come back. We'll invite, Sherry, back to show us the data they have. We'll have to deliberate on what that data shows us. And then we'll start thinking about options. And so we're not at a pilot project yet. And that pilot project, as you all know, because we've all heard this, is everything from, passive delivery of water to let's dig a new inlet. And while, some of the concerns yesterday at our meeting with the management and STEM AC was, gosh, don't even look at this. The reality is we have to look at everything. All these are potential solutions. We'll let science drive that next step. So this would be an iterative process. We would be coming back to you through the STEM AC and the management, especially if we're thinking at some point about funding from council on a pilot project. So this is just the beginning of a long-term relationship.
And a long-term process. It's not going to happen this month.
Yes, sir.
I know this is just for information, but I'm a huge advocate of inlets. I've studied this when I was in graduate school. During my studies, I interviewed the first chairman of the first inlet commission. He died 40 years ago, Jerry Don McCoy. He told me back then, and he dug the first inlet in Palm Beach with a mule cart, and he saw the Lake Worth area rebound dramatically by the flushing they created there. And I was just in grad school then, and he said, you've got to realize this whole lagoon system needs to be flushed because historically it used to flush. When it rained a lot like we just had this year, it would breach in the low sections of the barrier island and blow out for months. And it would gradually seal up in the dry season, and the cycle would repeat itself during a wet summer. And there used to be hundreds of these little islets that would occur. The last Hurricane Matthew blew one out by Jacksonville. We have stopped that process north of the Sebastian Inlet by having the Cape Canaveral there and roads and condos. The inlets used to occur. Now they can't occur because we have so many man-made structures. We've got to allow the flushing to occur some way. Maybe it's not an inlet, maybe it's tubes. The moon tide we just had, the super moon tide, would have been ideal to allow the differentials with just tubes with flap gates to occur, to allow billions of gallons of water to exchange without pumping. But if we're smart about this, we can put these tubes and or environmentally designed inlets at the right location to allow the maximum flushing at the right time. We may not need them all the time, but I think we've got to consider this a valuable tool in the toolbox, because what's happened is we've added more, as your data shows, we've added a lot more drainage from Lake Okeechobee, 400,000 acre feet of water from Lake O every year. That's the size of Indian River County, a foot deep, added that normally doesn't go in that fragile little lagoon. We got to help it some way, and to take out and to do some of the things we can do are great, but the big picture is stopping Lake O discharges and dealing with our own massive increases in our drainage areas by dispersed storage and flushing. This lagoon needs some surgery, unfortunately, and I think this is part of the multiple steps we need to do. I'm a big advocate of this. I think we need to look at this hard and engage our management committee and our scientists to tell us the optimum place to have these is here and here, where the currents are favorable for it, maximum exchange of water. It's an important part, and if you just look at the historical accounts of some of our great novels of this area, they all show inlets. People know that I'm an advocate. They sent me aerials of and Nat Reed's family sent me aerials of Jupiter Island. There used to be one at Peck's Lake that flushed out there in Peck's Lake, and on and on and on. I mean, they were there. We just have put A1A and condos there, and it can't do it anymore. And we need to help this beautiful lagoon with some flushing at some scientifically designed points. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, please.
I'm with Doug. I think this is a great project. Probably 2 years ago, I was a Flushing skeptic, and then I started, meeting with folks around this region and talking about what it used to be and what it is now. And so as we approach this project and talking with St. John's, they're looking at trying to get back to what nature once provided, not trying to further man alter something like with a new navigable inlet or something like that is very different than what nature used to provide. So this is one where we're trying to figure out what the lagoon needs to restore its ecology. With that in mind, I think it's perfectly within the NEP's swim lane for Dwayne to work with them. I don't think we need to do a motion for Dwayne to work with someone every time an idea that is clearly within our mission comes up. So I don't know, Dwayne, if you feel like you need a motion, I don't think you do. I think this is something that clearly we would all expect you to do, is to work on solutions for the lagoon as part of your daily business.
Thank you, sir. We have other comments? Yes, sir, please.
Well, when Hurricane Sandy went up the East Coast, it blew out some new inlets up there, and I read some of the follow-up, scientific follow-up, and they said that the health of their lagoon system increased dramatically just in a year and a half following those new inlets that are still there. So flushing of their lagoon system, ours is similar. We have a more diverse one down here, but I just think we need to help this beautiful girl get beautiful again. And I think one of the tools, not the only one of them is this. And if you look at the Barefoot Mailman and Jonathan Dickinson's journals, they all talk about the multiple inlets they had to negotiate by stashing a boat and going across an inlet, and they stashed another canoe 20 miles down the way, and there was another inlet. They were all over the place seasonally, and we've stopped it. So anyway, I could go on forever. That's what I used to study and enjoy, but it's a part of this Lagoon's history, and it should be a part of its future.
Yes, and there are anecdotal reports, even more recent, even because some of the guys that used to come into the Jupiter area to fish,
Yep.
they would talk about where it would break through, different places it'd break through. Any other comments? Dwayne, what do you more specifically see?
I don't think I need any more direction. We'll work directly with Water Management District on this project, bring it back as needed when we hit the timelines. We have 22 action plans in the current CCMP. I think we're going to have a few more as we revise, and so this is just one of many pathways of restoration that we're going to address in the next 18 months.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Item 6, which is the consent. What I would like to do, when you get a second, is we'll address consent at the moment, but here in the future, probably we'll put consent and the agenda considerations together so that we can sort of make that flow, because I think it does flow. Is there approval for the minutes that were dispersed?
Move approval.
Here. Second. It's been moved and seconded. That was Zadowski and Smith. Any further discussion? Any wish to vote no? That's accepted unanimously. Thank you very much. Old business 7, please.
Item 7A, we've talked before about Florida Estuaries Alliance. We broached this subject yesterday with the Management Board and the STEM AC, and they recommended that we move forward with this memorandum of understanding. I want to just clearly, because I know there were some concerns about how this would function. This is not going to add, a lot of time, staff time. In fact, I met with the 4 directors just last week to talk about this. This MOU is not intended for the Alliance as some association to go, chase legislative budget requests. We all clearly talked about it. We all agree that this MOU allows us to work together, work more closely together, provide some formal base for us when we're talking to the EPA, but most importantly, it gives us the ability to move together in trying to not just educate but inform people, including new elected officials, that it's not just the Indian River Lagoon, that we've got 4 estuaries of national significance dedicated by Congress, all with significant economic value. So one of the first things we will do together, we'll actually start tomorrow, because staff will be in Louisiana for the Restore American Estuaries Conference. And we are looking at a changed EPA over the course of the next several years and talking about how we make sure that our elected officials on the congressional level understand the economic value of these sites. So the request today is to allow Executive Director to execute that MOU and to work with the partners in not just looking for potential grants, but also to work closely together in that education and information exchange.
We're looking for a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir,
Dr. DeFreitas, is there a budget implication to this memo?
There are no budget implications.
In that case, I'll move to approve.
Been a motion to approve by Member Sadowski and seconded by Member Mornique. Further discussion? Is there public comment? Is there anyone that wishes to vote no on this motion? That's accepted unanimously.
Item
7B,
7B is looking forward to our 2017-2018 work plan development and strategic funding approach. Again, as we discussed last meeting, the concept would be that we bring together council and, in fact, the Management Board and the STEM AC Committee to look at, co-joining our planning process for the upcoming work plan with a budget workshop. We discussed this with both committees yesterday, and you see before you the way we've laid this out. There were some concerns and legitimate concerns among some of our local partners that very often the EPA dollars were viewed as federal match to state projects. And so this does not, at this time, request any kind of funding allocations. We'll go ahead and work with our partners to make sure we don't lose that ability. But the idea would be that the EPA Section 320 grant dollars, rather than being 100% reactive grant proposals, would be more strategic. And that we would come to that proposal that goes to the EPA by June with a strategic plan in place. So it could have an RFP component. It might even be specifically to certain areas that we collectively decide are important, that we could even prioritize the federal-local match. I talked, with Kathy LaMartina at length with this after. The IRL Council local cost share, unless you all have changed your mind, you have been very clear with staff, let's look at restoration, kind of the implementation of restoration projects rather than, big planning or research. And so we're continuing along that vein unless you give us other direction. And we can work that plan together. And the other big shift would be taking the specialty license plate funds, which come county by county, and then setting up a budget and a work plan that would allow for a small grants program that would be administered in partnership with our Citizens Advisory Committee to actually start to do some small grants. And I'm going to assume it'll be $10,000 or less, but we'll do this through that process, working with management conference and you all to come up with a work plan. And this is how it works in Tampa Bay quite well, that by March 1, we would have a draft budget in place based on our bylaws, but we would have a really clear work plan that's attached to that draft budget. We'll have time to fine-tune certain aspects of that, but remember that by June 1, we have to have a proposal for the EPA Section 320 money into the EPA for grant review and approval. And we'll work closely to make sure that we're in compliance. I've already talked to the EPA. They endorse this shift. They actually like it because it's strategic. And each year that we can look at priorities. So all staff is asking right now is to, if there are no objections to this concept, allow us to work with you all and the management conference to start building this new view, this new approach to both budgeting and work plan development. And then when we convene next year in that January, February time frame, we'll fine-tune it, review it, and by March 1, have a fully aligned work plan and budget draft in place.
We have comments or questions. What I would understand that the method that we're talking about is a little different than what we've done, and it will be, this approach will then come back to the board for specific approval of these specific projects associated with dollar amounts.
That's correct.
Other comments, questions? Yes, sir, please.
So the strategic implementation of NEP, that's, I think I understand what that is, but that will generate the RFP directions.
Actually, we probably have 2 levels of RFP. So I anticipate that in the local cost share dollar, we would issue an RFP with some priorities like we have in the past, and that's going to be restoration specific. And then we would have that bucket of responses. Mm-hmm. And then within the federal dollars, we would have a portion. So I'm going to just, give you a hypothetical. We might say $200,000, of that EPA money directed to CCMP development and implementation with a specific RFP for some gap in scientific knowledge that we need to do an action plan. Maybe it's Flushing, the next phase. $300,000 to $400,000 would be available in an RFP, but we wouldn't do it in advance. So we would not be telling the EPA that we are using their dollars to fund this project, this project, this project. We'll be saying we are going to put out a competitive RFP. Here's this, the RFP scope of work, and it could be, we are going to prioritize high-value restoration projects where we have state or local money matching federal dollars. And so we could prioritize and see what we get, and maybe $100,000 to citizen engagement. So we'll have that discussion at the STEM-AC, the CAC, within the management conference, bring that draft to management board, ultimately bring it to you for a final decision. With the timeline, we need to have a draft budget in place by March 1. And I would really like to have that. We've talked about this, totally aligned with a pretty clear and, and succinct work plan. So each year, when we hit July and we actually finalize that budget, that we are absolutely crystal clear where we're headed for that upcoming fiscal year, which will begin October 1.
Mr. Chairman, based on what I've heard, I would like to make a motion to approve because we need to get to work. We've been building this organization now for over a year, and we've got to get to work. So my motion is to approve.
Second.
There's a motion by Member Zadowski and second by Member Vernick. There further discussion, and I think, Kathy, this is along the lines that you were involved in with the monies that go for the Lagoon, St. Lucie, Indian River issues team. I think this is along that line, but
yes, what I was talking to Dwayne about was that as the counties apply for funding to the council, they may have a project that already has a grant associated with the state agency, entity, dollars, whatever, and they may only be able to match those state dollars with federal dollars. So that was my concern, having all the federal dollars be used for CCMP implementation and science. So that's just something I just want to, let you guys be aware of. You may not have a problem switching some of the other funds up there and vice versa, so that the federal dollars, they're just more easily matched with state funds. That's all I was saying.
what we're doing now, is that going to impede the flexibility that we're?
No, I don't think so. We just need to consider, and I'm glad this came up yesterday because it wasn't a consideration that, that I had in mind, but it's very clear, this federal, you can't match federal to federal, and very often many of these projects are limited, and you can't go state to state. And, and so we need to make sure that we're not making, doing projects harder. We need to be making it easier, but from an executive director standpoint, I need some of those EPA dollars to do some of the strategic programmatic implementation, because we are focused on implementation of restoration. So that's kind of the flexible bucket. So we'll make sure we work together with our partners so it works.
Drew, do you have comments you'd like to make on this?
Yeah, we'll have to look at the state matching requirements, because I think there may be some room there. Because I know we match, like Water Management District dollars are used to match state grants in a number of occasions. So there is some flexibility there. But really my thought on this one is, and I'm going to support the motion, this is good, but on the there may be projects that aren't really suitable for RFP, partnership projects, those types of things, so I don't want to box us in necessarily on that. Like the feasibility study we did with the stormwater, the large stormwater projects we did with St. John's, that may have another phase in its future that isn't really an RFP kind of situation. So, I don't think voting on this boxes us into using RFPs only, but just wanted to put that out there.
Well, we want to make sure that the motion is understood, and we might need to review the motion so that it doesn't just specifically tie us
Mr.
to
Chair,
it.
the motion at this point is, if you're comfortable with this idea of modifying the way we've done work historically, we will come back with, a very clear approach in our next meeting as part of that budget workshop and program alignment to make sure that we've addressed these issues. And Drew's comment is one that we already have talked about with staff, that, I envision that within our budget that we may have a line item that is reserved for opportunities, like a follow-up on a project that's already within our, our program and that we've reviewed, where we can opportunistically during the year you kind of leverage our dollars with partnerships. So we need to have some of those dollars at the local cost share available to move forward in a proactive way.
So that flexibility is what you envisioned in your motion.
As a matter of fact, and quite frankly, with the 200 sets of eyes that we have on this with the management committee, the citizens committee, the STEM committee, this board, I think that getting a focus and moving forward, we're going to have a lot of these questions down the road, and those questions will be asked and answered in each of those different levels, which is why I want to give that flexibility to you and move forward with this and quite frankly, we can change. If it's not working, we have the ability to change that policy going forward. But giving a new approach, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result often is, considered nuts. But let's give an opportunity, and then we can change policy if we so choose in the future.
You good? On the second? Oh, yeah. Maybe we ought to clarify, Kathy, are you at a point where you can tell us in motion?
The motion is that we're modifying basically the way the NEP does work historically. We as staff are going to come back at the next meeting and incorporate this idea, this concept, into something formal that we'll talk about as part of the budget discussions.
Any other questions on the motion? Is there public that would have comment? Is there anyone that wishes to vote no on this? I'm sorry, somebody did. Bob did.
Trying not to be disruptive. A generic comment and then a specific comment to this specific item. As I sit in the back there, there are eight agenda items that were discussed and motions taken or discussed in some fashion at yesterday's meeting. And typically we schedule the management board report towards the end and after you've made decisions, whereas that input may be valuable to you prior to making the decision. So I'm asking you all, I can bring it up again in consideration of it. Regards to this specific item as discussed yesterday was exactly as you've been told, is the make sure that there's clarity as to what funds can match with what funds, and that we don't put ourselves in a negative position. But the big question that probably needs to go to Carolyn is how is this agency viewed? This council is as a 189 special district, is it viewed as a state? As Drew says, there is some flexibility in the water management district issues. We need to be crystal clear on that. We need to be in a position that if we tell Martin County that we're going to put it in this box and they've got things obligated that may not match, we may hurt them. We may hurt St. Lucie County. So, Kathy said that you guys are going to come back. The position that we left with the management board yesterday was that it would come back to the management board and to be looked at, because we need to make crystal clear that whatever we have proposed, and the concept is something we've been talking about a long time. Before we'd cast the net and tell people, give us whatever you want, we're going to go through that. Now we're saying, no, we're putting together a menu to benefit the lagoon, and we're going to tell you what fish we want to catch. Okay, so that's the strategic planning that's right on target. We're going to tell people we need issues for this, and that, but we also need to make sure that our funding is if it needs to be inviolate, then it needs to keep inviolate to preserve it. But if it has the flexibility, so, I can get a comfort level on that as the chair of your management board. I want to hear council tell me that, what you're saying is good, but that Drew's got the expertise from the state to state position. We just need to make sure that we're clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, and maybe we just ask Carol at this point, opinion, but what I want to remind us is that we are no longer under the umbrella of St. John's Water Management District. We are an independent district, which changes the game plan for us anyway. And so I'd like to hear from Ms. Anseh as to her opinion as to what has been stated.
Are you at a point that you would like to give that?
Sure, Mr. Chair. I have had a conversation with your executive director, and I've had some conversations with Kathy this morning about the issue. Of course, as you know, and as Commissioner just pointed out, you are a Chapter 189 special district of the state of Florida. As an independent special district, it will be incumbent upon the granting agencies. I don't know what DEP's grant requirements will be in terms of how that would be interpreted as it applies to special districts. That's not a legal determination I would make. It's a legal determination ultimately the lawyers and grants folks at the department would make. It's pretty clear what our status is, and then ultimately it'll be up to that entity to determine whether we fall into the state bucket or not, and if that's a problem under the particular grant requirements.
If you'd like, I can come back with some, clarification once I, get that from my staff. I just know that we've done in the past. I don't know the rationale, right? So, but I can come back and give you all a briefing on how we look for match and where that can come from.
I think that'd be useful, but I think at the moment what we're doing is just, this is preparatory. And so when we come back and have a little more of a firm base of what of the direction, and then that will then guide us into the specifics. Is that good? Is that acceptable? All right, we do have a motion. And is there any further discussion? Is anyone that wishes to vote no on the motion? Accepted unanimously. Thank you very much. We are at 7C.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, last month we had an item on the agenda to discuss the process for the executive director's performance evaluation. You all entered into an employment agreement with the executive director a year ago in October. The employment agreement calls for an annual evaluation. When we discussed it at last month's meeting, you directed me to prepare an evaluation form based on some of the forms our firm has used with administrators of city and county governments and other special districts. I did that. I transmitted it to all of you via email and asked that you complete the form so that at some point I get a copy back and may include it in our files for the public record, but that today you all be prepared to discuss and consider the executive director's performance over the past year. And the employment agreement also states that to the degree that you make any changes in salary or benefits, that it doesn't require an amendment to the agreement. It can be done by motion. I don't know if that's on the table, but that's the only other provision in the executive director's employment agreement as it relates to his performance evaluation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll answer any questions or turn it over to you for further discussion.
We have questions for Ms. Anseh, please.
Mr. Chairman, did you need those evaluations back to you before this meeting? Because fortunately, I should say, I got married and spent most of my time not paying attention to that form. So if that was necessary, I'm at a loss because I didn't fill it out yet.
You weren't the only one, and it's not required that the form be given to me before today's meeting. You all can discuss the evaluation, discuss the performance today, and then ultimately get the evaluation to me so it can be shared and placed in the file and become a public record.
Okay. Thank you. That came out wrong the first time. Unfortunately, because I didn't fill out the form, not because I got married.
Understood, sir.
But it was hard for you to overcome that smile.
It was, and still is.
We have questions for Ms. Anseh. Ms. Anseh might have questions for us. We're looking at 7C. Actually, 7C is, I don't see it in our packet. Maybe it is. I just don't see it. Was it to be? Was 7C, was there a form that was supposed to be in our packet? But there was a form.
That's, no, you're sure item.
There was.
Mr. Chairman,
All right.
if I could move this along, because I think that to a person up here, that we have seen a great deal of work and effort out of Dr. DeFries and the staff, and I have no negative comments personally, actually all positive and very high level of approval of his work. So from an evaluation standpoint, from my point of view, excellent to superb is what I would evaluate. And at last meeting, I asked you if you would be indicating a request for an increase in salary. You said you would not be. If that were to be the case, I would like to move forward with approving his evaluation at an excellent to superior rating in this year.
I think that's well taken, and we have a, yes, sir, please, Richard.
We have not responded either, but I would second the statement that was just made.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I would third that one.
Okay. Other comments?
I did do my evaluation.
You're the one.
So I will second that and vote in favor. Yeah, about 45 years ago.
Trying to catch up.
Are there other comments? I think that, well, I turned an evaluation in. Where it went, I'm not sure, but I know I turned one in, but anyhow. But it was similarly, and I think the observations are you're doing very, very well. You're doing a good job. You're very focused. You're doing, and I don't know how you're able to be on the road so much. But good going.
Because of two amazing staff members, actually.
Good.
And council.
Good. Good. There's a motion and second. Kathy, you got those? It was Member Zadowski and Member Weinger. That the evaluation reflect excellent to superior. Further discussion? Anyone wish to vote no? That's accepted unanimously, and I think appropriately. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, if you haven't yet returned your forms, if you would, just either see me after or feel free to email them to me whenever it's convenient for you.
Might I request, please, ma'am, that if you do have it in email form, if you might just resend it to whomever. Member Smith said that.
I will.
Yeah, and mine went where, I'm not sure, but yes, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow instructions right. Does the form need to be filled out or just return it to you blank? I don't know.
Preferably completed, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What if we just write on the top what we voted on, and I don't know, it's mandatory you get the form back?
Well,
I could fill it out right now or the next agenda item.
it's not mandatory. The employment agreement does contemplate that there will be a format agreed upon, and so at the last month's board meeting, you all directed me to use this form for you to individually fill out. So I think ideally you'd complete it, but I think that we'll also add to Dr. DeFries's file the action that the board took today based on the motion, but I think the individual evaluation forms should be returned completed. Thank you.
Darn it.
Okay. Item 8A, please.
Whose slides? Okay, thanks. Okay, item 8A is for information only, but we do want a motion kind of looking forward. We are in the process, actually Kathy is in the process of taking our success of this year and turning it into an annual report that would be available to citizens, elected officials, showing what we actually did this year, and it's quite a substantial amount of productivity. And so what we're recommending is, and we've broached this with the management board and the STEM AC yesterday, that we are not ready to yet showcase the full draft. I'll show you the front page. This is going to be a very rolled up view of our success and our milestones and our program to date, and also the view for next year. And so what we're requesting is that we're going to open this up. We will send it to each of you for your comments. We're going to open it up to our entire management conference for comments, but we would like to have this available before session starts. And so in order to advance, because we're going to need to publish a few of these through the print process, what we're asking for is a motion to take those comments, make those revisions. If there's anything controversial, we'll bring it back. But if there's nothing controversial, that we'll go ahead and go to print and get those available in an appropriate time frame. And so I just want to show you what that first page is looking like, which is actually, you know, Kathy didn't want to show it because it's not perfect yet, but we did show the Management Board and STEM Committee yesterday a number of pages. It's got a map with all 19 projects and a little description. I'm really pleased at her expertise in putting this together. But this will reflect, and we will do this every year, very much like private industry. This will be a report to you as shareholders, investors, but also to the community at large. So the motion we're requesting is, you know, go ahead, get the review from our conference. If it's anything objectionable that's controversial, we'll bring it back. But if it's all just minor stuff, we'll move it forward, get it printed, and get it ready for distribution early in 2017.
We have questions for Dr. DeFries, please. Yes, sir.
Move approval. Oh, Kathy's saying there's one more. So take a look at this one. This is one of the spreads where we've taken the approach that Brevard County with reduce, remove, restore, respond, added 3 of our own, you know, just to kind of broaden the base a little bit. But this is the look of this, very open, clear, concise, not to pick on my science friends, and since I'm a scientist, not like a scientist report. This is, you know, more like a report to the citizens.
And so we appreciate Virginia's agreement that we can use their form.
She hated that I added multiple R's to their approach. Make it more complicated.
We appreciate getting to use your format. There is a motion. Is there a second? It's been moved. Kathy, did you get, who was the second?
I was the second.
Chris? Okay.
Sorry.
And a motion and a second that we, sir, please.
Yeah, if the picture goes back up there, I don't know if you can do that, Dwayne.
Could you post this picture back up and I'll fast forward to it?
It's absolutely a beautiful picture, and I know that generally everybody knows that this lagoon is in deep trouble. But if I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., and I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, looks pretty good to me. Why do you need any money?
We have other spreads that actually define the year that we just went through, with pictures of the cyanobacterial bloom down at the Rio community, pictures of the fish kill and the brown tide. So, you know, we're contrasting what is to what might be. So you're just seeing one part of this. But yeah, we've got the ugly in it as well.
Well, and I recognize that we walk a thin line because we don't want to scare people away that might want to visit our beautiful lagoon. So, yeah, I understand it's a touchy subject, but I just wanted to put that in there. But I think it looks great.
And move seconded. Further discussion? Anyone wish to vote no? That's
Is there any,
carried
I
unanimously.
don't know if there's any public comment.
Ma'am, sorry,
Was there any public comment?
public? Anyone wish to vote no? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Yes, sir, B.
Item number B is for information only. I'll turn it over to our legal counsel. It has already been addressed in a public comment earlier. So, Carolyn?
Thank you, sir. Earlier, you did hear, if you hadn't heard already, that recently the Indian River County Commission voted 3-2 to pursue membership in the IRL Council. And so today I just wanted to go over with you the legal and procedural steps that are contemplated in the interlocal agreement. As you may recall, back in September of last year, when we added the Indian River County Coalition to the IRL Council, we did an amendment to our interlocal agreement that allowed for their participation, but then also called out specifically how things would change or what steps would need to be taken in the event Indian River County Commission ever changed their mind and wanted to join. And so we went through those steps, recorded that in the interlocal agreement, and so that now remains the path forward for how to deal with this process. And so basically what the interlocal agreement says is that in the event that the Indian River County determines it would like to be a party to the agreement and serve on the board of directors, the Indian River County Lagoon Coalition will withdraw as a party upon the occurrence of all of the following. And there are 4 different things that have to happen. The first is the Indian River County Commission has to vote in favor of executing an amended interlocal agreement to reflect the substitution of the county as a party and the withdrawal of the coalition. That has not happened yet. What their vote was recently, I can't remember if it was a week before last, was to pursue the membership. It wasn't to approve a specific agreement because we don't have an agreement drafted yet that would actually swap out the party of the coalition for the county. But the first step is they would have to vote in favor of executing that interlocal. The second is that you all, this board, would have to vote unanimously to allow for the substitution of the county for the coalition. The third step is that the county would have to execute the interlocal agreement, and that interlocal agreement would be recorded in the public records. And then the fourth step would be that the county refunds to the coalition the pro rata portion of membership fee that they had already paid for this upcoming fiscal year. So those are the steps that have to take place to effectuate the change. In the audience, as you heard earlier, we have Commissioner Zork from Indian River County, as well as the Indian River County Attorney, who you may recall participated in some of the proceedings when we were forming the IRL Council and is familiar with the interlocal agreement as well. So I'm sure if they have any further information that they'd like to add, they're here for you. And so at this point, we need direction on how to proceed. When I heard the news, part of me thought, well, I could quickly make the changes to the interlocal and have a document ready, but then thought I should bring it to you all so that you understand the steps and get direction from you to do that, so that then I have a document that I can actually present to the county for their consideration if that's the desire of the board.
Please. Yeah,
Being an Indian River County, and first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Zork for being with us through good times and bad. He has been there through it all and a steadfast supporter of this council since the day one, despite the opposition in his own county commission. And we owe him a debt of gratitude to bring this 3-2 vote to where it is. Being that I live in that county, my kids are born in that county, and they love the county, it's heartwarming to see that they're finally a part of this team. And I'm glad this has finally happened. I would love to have, as Bob Ulovich wanted, a 5-0 vote. I would love to have a 5-0 vote maybe someday. But right now, 3-2, the glass is half full, and we have everybody on board, as they should be. And if you, Carolyn, if you need a motion to move forward at this juncture, or just, is there anything you need from the council?
I just need general direction. I don't think it has to be a formal motion, that the board is interested in taking the next step of having me draft the interlocal agreement.
I'm, as a board member, I'm very interested in moving forward, and I want to publicly thank Commissioner Zork for his hard work on bringing this county into the fold.
Mr. Chairman?
please.
Yeah, although we don't need it, I would suggest that we have a motion, and if you would like to make it, I will second it, that we move forward and allow them to do what they have to do before they're admitted to us as a group, as part of the coalition.
So moved.
I'll second it.
There's a motion by Member Mornique, seconded by Commissioner Smith, that the actions that would be determined by council, legal counsel, are being approved so that those steps can be orderly taken in the sequence as would be determined by legal counsel as meeting the requirements that were previously crafted in our original documentation. You didn't say all of that, did you?
No, I was just sitting here in amazement thinking, wow, this guy's really eloquent.
Chairman.
Or uses a lot of time, I'm not sure which one.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, yes, sir.
As part of consideration of the question, and I'd like to hear from the representative of the coalition. I think I heard it earlier, but for the record, what does the coalition feel as reentry into the NEP?
I'll answer the question. We have a coalition meeting here on Monday, but every indication I have from I receive is that the coalition is all for this.
Ms. Coy?
Thank you. And I will be at that meeting Monday.
Yeah. This is another member. We actually have all three members here, so if they all want to get up, they can endorse what I said.
But I would like to just present some caution. I too want the county, and am grateful to Commissioner Zork for all his hard work, and to the other two members who finally wanted to come and play. But I do this with caution. Though I don't really need extra meetings to go to either, I just want to share a story with you. You heard me get up and tell you about $300,000 that Sebastian is going to give away to help make sewer connections and do the right thing for the lagoon. Well, at the same time, I'm telling you that the county is trying to take that money and take the money that you just gave us in a grant. They've already put it in writing that they would like to have it so that they can lay down the initial lines. So, you know, the Lagoon Council giveth and the county taketh away. We're working on that, and I had a lengthy discussion with Commissioner Zork. I have some very, very big problems with the 3-2 vote. And though I know it's not perfect, and I know we're not going to change that, it makes it difficult when Sebastian's going to want something from this council, and let's say one of the three that's happy camper is on vacation. I mean, it kills processes. So I have a solution, a possible solution that I would like the county to consider, and I would like you to consider, because you have control of this situation and can make this happen. I think that the county's group, instead of being 5 county commissioners, should perhaps be 2 county commissioners and 1, 2, 3 representatives from the local groups who have been here with you all along. Now, if Vero Beach maybe doesn't want to put a council member on that, they could have a representative, maybe Judy Orcutt of the Sierra Club, or someone that would represent Vero's interest, someone from Sebastian. I'd volunteer this year, and not telling you if I'm going to be around in the future, but you know, if Sebastian wanted to appoint someone, I think that would be a good faith offer to show, because we have stood here with you. We have participated with you. I find it a little bit dark and sinister that we put the money in, wrote a grant, you gave us the money for the grant, and the county wants to take it, and they wouldn't stand up to begin with. That's a little odd to me. And so I have some concerns. They're healthy concerns, and I can see light at the end of the tunnel, but please don't jump to the conclusion that this is a really great thing, because the fact that there are 2 people who very, very vocally had not very nice things to say about this group. I would like to have a commission and a group that wants to work with you 100%, all the people in the group. So that would be my suggestion, is that it not be 5 county commissioners, maybe 3 commissioners and 4 representatives. That way we get a really good group representing. That's my thought. Thank you for listening. See you Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I tend to think those complexities were more focused on the arrangement that y'all have currently with the 3 municipals. And that may well be some interactions that you would like to develop in the future. I don't, at the moment, I don't see Ms. Ansey, do you have comment that you would like?
Well, currently, the party to the agreement is the Indian River County Coalition. They have a separate interlocal agreement under which they were formed and operate under, and of course, that involves the municipalities. I mean, I think what I heard really was a function of requesting them to perhaps change that structure so that it involved the county, and then they still participate in this same seat, which wouldn't require an amendment to our agreement, but may require an amendment to their agreement. I mean, I'm not going to speak for Indian River County. I don't know that that's what they've requested or are seeking, but that's a political, not a legal issue.
That was sort of the drift that I caught, and that's not our area.
Well, as I say, we have a meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday to discuss this and other issues, the 3 cities, and we'll certainly take it up at that point in time. You might want to be part of that. You know, I can't speak for the other 2 members. We have never taken it up, other than the interlocals that exist and the agreements that exist at this point in time. I think we have to do that on Monday. But I would welcome your attendance, since you're the lawyer that understands this. I'm not a lawyer.
I work for this board. I'll do what you tell me to do, sir.
At the moment, what we're doing is we're considering a motion that would give instructions, but almost suggestions.
Direction.
Okay, that's more nearly neutral. But giving directions to our legal counsel that we would like to move forward in the recognition of the pathway that was designed for this change in representation. So, but that pathway is dependent upon those participants, and they have activities, you guys have activities solely separate, apart from us totally. We're not, all we are is sort of standing back and saying, okay, here's the pathway. That's what I understand this. Am I too far off on that?
I think the motion, as I understood it, was to direct me to proceed with preparing a proposed interlocal agreement that would substitute the county, as requested by the county, as the party to the interlocal agreement. That would be the next step for me to do. There's nothing else really for me to do if that's, unless the board wants to go down this other track of some other alternative. But for me to incorporate Indian River County under our interlocal agreement, the first step is to come up with an agreement, amended agreement that has them as the party. And then again, it would come back to this board after their approval. It would come back to this board for unanimous approval by you all.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
As a suggestion, and the council that actually currently holds the seat, I think, holds the cards. I think you would have the ability to have each of your attorneys at that meeting to discuss whatever possible arrangement you'll relinquish the seat to Indian River County and be placed into the interlocal agreement, either through you or through the county. And that's the Indian River County and the city's issue. It's not the purview of this board to direct or demand some action in between. I think that you hold the seat as the city's coalition or the county's coalition. The county wishes to participate, but I think you hold the seat, and to relinquish it, you could require any requested implementation of conditions. That's only my opinion. I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. But I think that it's in the purview of Indian River County and its cities and the coalition that actually holds that seat to determine those details.
Yeah, I think that would be my question as well. If the county comes forward and says they wish to participate, then it's incumbent upon the coalition to say, yes, we'll step down, or no, we won't step down. Is that simplistic?
Well, the interlocal agreement provides that it's not incumbent on the coalition. They have to step down, but the way the interlocal agreement is drafted, it requires a unanimous vote of this board. So that means if they vote no, by definition, they do hold the cards, but really every one of you holds the cards
it's
in
up
that
to
any
us.
one no vote amongst all of this board can kill the participation of Indian River County. And that's the case for all new members to this organization. And as you may recall, when we went through the design team process, it was important for this board to ensure that there was unanimous approval by each of you for any new member, and it was treated the same way for purposes of the substitution of Indian River County.
And really, at this time, we're spending a lot of time on a theoretical question. They have not done what they need to do to take over that position, and until they do, I don't know why we're even talking about it.
Yes, I think that's true. I think, you basically have to table. We may come to a decision on Monday, but I can't speak for the other two cities, really. We're in the position where we have not had a meeting where Andrea has been present at this point in time. So that initial meeting is Monday. So, we haven't covered the issue. I would rather we had the opportunity to do that, frankly. Not that I have any hard opinion on it, really, a personal opinion, or that the city of Vero Beach does, nor does the city of Vero Beach have any problem furnishing a representative to anything that we're part of into the future. That there are several people that would like to do that.
And for our part, we signed an agreement that said what would needed to happen before we would consider their admission. That has not happened, so what are we talking about? That's my point.
Yeah, the only other comment I'd like to make is that then I think it would be appropriate to our Monday meeting that you come to the meeting, and it's a public meeting, obviously, and that we deal with what we're going to do in Indian River County.
If I may,
Does that make sense or not?
I tend to have sympathy towards this, in that we are discussing something that's theoretical, but the discussion was centered around authorizing Ms. Yancey to respond to the positive fulfillment of the steps.
Yes, again, since the first step is for the Indian River County Commission to vote in favor of executing an amended agreement, the county attorney asked me, can I please see that amended agreement, because he needs to develop an agenda that would have that agreement present for his commission to vote in favor of it. I didn't have an agreement drafted, and just before I spent the time doing that, knowing we were meeting within days, I informed him that I was going to bring it to this board for direction. So that's really the first step, because he can't get his commission to take the first step until he has a document that's prepared.
Which I believe we can see as an appropriate request. I think that would be difficult for any of us to say, just carte blanche.
Well, if that's all it is, then that would be fine, but it's the same agreement that we all signed.
Yes.
It's just substituting the cities. It's basically a nothing change. And so, go ahead, sure, fine,
We're
doesn't
good?
make any difference.
Are we good? Just a second. Yes, sir.
I think we have consensus, and I don't think we need a motion, simply to say, Ms. Yancey, follow the issues that happen with the council, or the council coalition and the county, after which time, whatever decision's made by the holder of the seat, you can then provide the draft as indicated that we all signed. But whatever limitations or whatever conditions, I think, come from the holder of the seat to the one who would replace.
I think we've sort of reached resolution without motion. Is that sufficient?
I think I understand the direction, yes, sir.
Okay, but I want to make sure that because you're here and we appreciate your time, is that yes, we are awaiting, and I think Ms. Yancey is, as was suggested, whatever the documentation would be the same that each of us have signed in the past.
Dylan Reingold, County Attorney, Indian River County. I just look forward to working with your attorney on getting through the documents and bringing them back to my board for approval and moving forward with joining the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm good. I just want to hear from Commissioner Zork.
Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. Tim Zork, County Commission, District 3, Indian River. Well, I thought third time was the charm, but I see third time the charm to get to here, and but I'll let the attorneys work out. You know, I don't want you to have to change the rules. We just want to comply with the rules the way they're written. That I'm sure between the two of them, they can work that out of what we need to do. So maybe fourth time we'll be sealing the envelope, but we'll have to see. But as you know, many of you I know personally, there's a new face up here that I have not personally met with before that look forward to carrying forward my passion for the lagoon, whether it's flushing projects or water scrubbing projects or other things that I've been working on individually back in the county to keep participation. And it was for those of you who watched the meeting that day, to get the 3-2 vote. Now, if you would have said it had to be a 5-0 vote, I would have waited for a different time period. But to me, it was a motion that passed, and since there was no criteria, to me, a 3-2 is the same as a 5-0. So, but we continue to work with you through this process and to an amicable decision or process that works out for everybody.
Thank you, sir. Yes, you did, but you spoke on this item earlier.
That was under number 5.
It
I
doesn't,
did make a note.
no, you get one shot at it. And I appreciate it, thank you. But we do need to get into our work plan. So 8C.
Mr. Chair, we have 3 items, all representing revisions to our current 2016-2017 work plan, and we'll take those each individually. The first is that we are responding, as we always do, to each of you as investors, and we've been working with the South Florida Water Management District because of the serious issues going on in the southern end. This last year, we focused our work plan projects within Martin and St. Lucie County. There is an interest in doing the same. When we looked at our current work plan, we had projects already through our RFP project and proposal, but it didn't come to that full $500,000 commitment that South Florida Water Management District makes. And so we're making a recommendation today to add the first-ranked project from the St. Lucie River Issues team, and we served on that committee. In fact, Kathy was there, our chairman on the management board was there, and so the plan would be, so I would send a letter to South Florida saying, here are the projects that we intend to complete this year in order to get a check distribution. That will add this project in on that list, and then we'll have $50,000 in reserve for a project to be identified in the future. Right now, we're thinking small grants, but we'll work with South Florida to make sure that it's an appropriate restoration project, and that has been the focus. And so we're requesting that amendment to our current work plan, send a letter to South Florida, and then receive check distribution.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I've been lucky enough to have served on the St. Lucie Issues team. Kathy, for how long have we been together? Since 1998, almost 20 years. It's done yeoman's work in the St. Lucie Basin. I'm really proud of the work, and Kathy has kept us on point. I think this group the projects have been phenomenal, and I think this is a great addition, and I so move.
Further discussion? We hear a second.
Second.
Member Bornick has moved. Member Zadowski has seconded.
Mr. Chair, before you call the vote, just one point I want to put on the record. This was reviewed by the management board and the STEM AC yesterday. And the cautionary note is that, it'd be better if we had this all done, early on, so we're not kind of adjusting kind of midstream. We'll do our best as staff to try to, as we go into each fiscal year, having clear path. But this is a perfect example of we have an opportunity to do a good project and we're moving money to get that done.
Do we have any public comment that would like, anyone that disagrees, anyone wish to vote no on this item? Accepted unanimously. While I'm remembering it, we have our financials in an accrual basis, but it's reflecting that everybody has paid. Is that accurate?
Everybody has paid to date except for South Florida, and that payment is they're ready to go. That's just pending this letter to give them the data that they need to distribute the check.
Okay. Okay, I'll talk about that different time. Go ahead. It's just hard to know what our books actually are when we're doing income on an accrual basis.
Yeah, we've been tracking that very closely with SDS, and so we do have, full accounting and cash flow watches to make sure that we don't wind up in an encumbrance situation that cash flow is being, impacting, and so we're in good shape there.
Go ahead. Please.
We ready for
Yes,
the
sir,
second
please.
item? The second item is a substantial scope of work change, and I want to describe kind of the history. Back when we were up in Volusia County, which is really the beginning of the, this first fiscal year, we had a discussion about our support for Marine Resources Council and the development of a report card. At that time, within our work plan, we identified $45,000 in the budget. And at the time, our discussion was to support the University of Maryland in their delivery of the roll-up of that information. In discussions with Marine Resources Council and looking at the large amount of data that they're going to have to analyze, both with indicators and with those metrics, the request from Marine Resources Council was to look at a scope of work change that does four things. That it would shift the subcontractor from University of Maryland to a scientific consultant who's already on board with MRC on this issue to really do a number of tasks. The first is to actually do the science of identifying indicators, metrics, and target analysis. Task 2, populate the data, conduct the statistical analyses, and then do peer review and reporting. And so this science review would come back to the STEM AC and the management board. With that request, however, was an additional request for $25,000. And there was a discussion yesterday within the joint management board and STEM AC, about the substantial shift in the scope of work. And so we bring this to you with a staff recommendation to move forward. We had support at the management board and the STEM AC. However, it was not unanimous, and there was some minority dissent on this that I think had some, merit for consideration, and that is that we have moved a scope of work substantially with additional dollars, and so we're looking to your direction for how to proceed. That what I like about this shift is that we can use this science with our CCMP development. We're going to wind up having to do this work anyway. I don't want to, push it to next year and not have the ability to gain that knowledge that would come from the process. And Marine Resources Council is currently raising money and moving that process with private funding. I know Lisa's here today, and so while our staff position is to move forward this, we know that this is a significant scope of work change, and look for your direction.
We have questions or comments for Drew?
Go ahead, Drew. No, I've been talking too much. You're up.
So was this one part of the original solicitation where we solicited all the projects and stacked them up and?
That's correct.
Because I know we have at the department a lot of pots of funds that we have to solicit and score on. And generally, just for, as part of our consideration, our policy is if one of the projects that we selected under that solicitation changes the scope and the cost, then it's like, well, you can't, we look at that as not really in line with the spirit of the solicitation, right? So, in those circumstances, we'll generally say, well, since you were part of a solicitation, you'll need to come in with that change of scope and cost at the next solicitation for
Drew,
consideration.
I may have misspoke on that. It was within our discussion of work plan, but that specific RFP that we released, it wasn't part of that discussion. It was, adjunct to that discussion. So it wasn't in that, that published RFP process. It came to us as a request, but we looked at this project along with those projects when we did the work plan. So, yeah, I misunderstood your question.
It wasn't submitted as part of the solicitation, but we stacked it up against what we got in the solicitation.
My strong impression is we weren't aware of what we were asking for to begin. That I tried to say that gently. But we may not have sufficiently, I didn't say it gently enough, I can tell.
Well, I can actually help you there.
Okay.
The University of Maryland has their own process. They would be taking the data that was generated locally and then kind of rolling it up into that report card response. When Marine Resources Council and the consultant approached me on this, I saw some connection to CCMP, and part of the concern that number of you voiced in that discussion in Volusia County meeting was, what are we actually paying for, with the connection? And so this takes it out of the report card and actually puts those dollars into the scientific analysis that would then be pushed into the report card. And so the reason I felt pretty comfortable bringing this to you is that actually, because I agreed with some of the concerns about report cards, that this has higher value to us as a council. It's the science side. It would be reviewed, peer-reviewed within, our group. There is an intermediate step here that I think is worth consideration. And this is just, we did not discuss this yesterday, but as an executive director, I feel like I should give you options. And that is, if you're uncomfortable with the additional dollars, that we would accept the revision of the scope of work. I would go back to MRC based on the dollars already appropriated in our work plan, which is $45,000. And then as we look at our budget and our work plan process, we could amend a second phase, early in this next calendar year to address that difference. But this one is, a little tricky from the fiduciary standpoint, and I wanted to make sure you were clear about the discussion we had yesterday and some of the, I think, legitimate concerns about process.
What I was trying to express, I did a poor job of it, but what I was trying to express is that I had thought that the outcome that we sought was more complex than we were envisioning and allowing for, and that it was going to probably come down to needing more money.
And that is also correct. My understanding is MRC is looking at hundreds of thousands of data points just for water quality. So that, we discussed this, but our concern was if the science isn't good on the front end, then the report card actually becomes scientifically meaningless.
Well,
first,
it becomes useless, and our intent is conveyance of vital information to the public so that they then can become more reliant upon our efforts and become more knowledgeable of our activities.
Yes, sir.
So if we mess up, then we lose all of those benefits, and it'll take us PR to get back.
That's
That's how I
absolutely
see it
correct.
anyhow. That's how I see what we're doing.
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, Dwayne, did the STEM committee have any impact or any points of view saying that the science on the backside of this would be that much better rather than coming in with half a loaf, if you will?
We didn't have specific discussion, but I got the impression, both in the vote and the discussion, that there was a general consensus that the committees both like the idea that MRC and the consultant would be bringing these data and methodologies through our process, and that we would be reviewing that science, which would be in advance of actually any publication of a report card. What I particularly like is we're going to need some of that science to do some of our CCMP action planning, and so they wouldn't be working kind of in a vacuum. Almost all of our scientists are engaged with MRC at some level in this process as they roll these data sets up.
Well, with that as part of the conversation, I would suggest that I think this is, again, it's a bump in the road for process. I think we take advantage of having this process occur, understanding this going forward, but in the immediate provision today, this request to move forward, I would like to make a motion to approve staff recommendation, but also give staff a look back at the process so that we can manage whatever new process will come out of this, because I do think that there was somewhat of a challenge in the process, but I think we need to fix that or at least mend it to where it should be maybe more transparent or more fair, if that's the terminology. But I think we should move forward with this because I think we have made it very clear that science was going to drive this organization, and I think we need to have good science rather than half the science. And based on what I'm hearing, not providing the extra funding would do that. So I'd rather us provide the extra funding for the proper science for the whole 100% than to have some partial level of the science.
Second.
Member Zadowski has made a motion, been seconded.
And, you know, I agree completely. You know, we don't have enough money to fix the lagoon. If we're going to get enough money to fix it, we've got to have credibility. And if we don't have science, we don't have credibility.
Okay. Are there other comments, questions? Did you wish to speak? We're about to vote yes. Do you wish to speak?
Hopefully I won't mess that up. Well, I want to thank you for considering it and thank you for supporting this effort in the past. We're not calling it a report card anymore. We're calling it a State of the Indian River Lagoon assessment. And we really are focusing more on the vital signs, the indicators of health of that system, which includes the nutrient levels. One of the points that was made earlier is how effective is an average. So when we started looking at the different methodologies of dozens of report cards worldwide, and we realized the University of Maryland was really relying only on averages, we didn't see that as something that was going to be functional for what we needed. What we need to know is, are our management strategies working? Are we setting in place the priorities that need to happen? And we can't do that with gross averages. We need to do spatial analysis and understand temporal and spatial fluctuations over time. So, and we also know we have a system that's shifting, so we need to see that. We need to have that database set up so we can accommodate that type of change. So that's what we're shooting for. It's a much, much more complicated thing than creating an Excel spreadsheet and running a statistical average. So that's what we're trying to do here, and we really appreciate your consideration. And I'm glad to take any questions.
Questions or comments? Anything from public? Anyone wish to vote no on this motion?
Can I just have a discussion
please.
point? So I don't know if you remember the Volusia meeting, but I've always been sort of wondering why we're doing this. I know that the department does reports on Indian River Lagoon health. Both districts do. I've seen Brevard County's, reports. I mean, everyone's paying for this kind of information. And so now we have another entity, and I'm sure there's some I'm missing that feels like we're doing the same thing. So I would encourage that this effort be responsive to the STEM, so that the STEM comes from all these organizations that do this kind of work, and so that there may be some good interaction to make sure that we're getting something new, valuable, that's not a repeat, that maybe complements all the other efforts that are going on. But this council is not equipped to do that, but probably the STEM is. So some routine and significant engagement with those members, I think, would be useful.
Mr. Chairman?
I think that well taken. Yes, sir.
As the maker of the motion, actually, I like that methodology and that thought process. As part of the motion, it talked about looking at our process on how we achieve the applications and so on and so forth. But as part of that, I think it should be incumbent upon, and even in this motion, to include that the STEM committee review all data information that is out there that's already been paid for and provided, and to provide, their input as to how that data collection all works within, because I think we are the funnel. This is where all that information comes, and that's what I think the NEP is about, is being able to take from all the science that's available and provide this board and you with all the information necessary to make the best possible choices going forward to fix the lagoon. So if we can add that in as part of the motion, that basically funnels that information to STEM.
It's fine with me.
Please. Okay, it's been moved and seconded with that modification. And Dr. Jacoby, you were aware, you heard what he said, okay? You're good? Okay. Lisa, so that then calls upon this interaction. Okay, very well. Anyone wish to speak further? Anyone wish to speak, to vote no? Accepted unanimously. Yes, sir, please.
Mr. Chair, item number 3 is a shift from a Phase 1 project that did not require all the dollars that we appropriated this fiscal year to Phase 2. So Marine Discovery Center has requested, they have $6,225.05 in funds that they didn't actually use in Phase 1 of their H2O project, and they're requesting to just move that into the current fiscal year because we have funded their Phase 2. It's a small amount of money, but because it's changing dollars from one fiscal year to a next, so we need a motion to approve if you so choose.
Have a question? Any questions?
Make a motion to approve.
Member Smith has made a motion to approve. Second?
Second.
Member Daniels has seconded. Is there further discussion? Is there anything from public? Is there anyone that wishes to vote no? Accepted unanimously. Yes, sir.
Item number D is just some direction I need. As we enter this Florida legislative session, as you all know, there's been a lot of new faces, both at the state and the federal level. Last year, we had a legislative kind of one-pager that we used for information. You did this year develop a one-page position statement that actually has some general guidance for funding. And so I wanted to get some direction, and there's really kind of 3 options that I see. We could just lead with that position statement with some minor modifications because we have information about what citizens can do. I'll bring that back at the next board meeting. We could take that information and create a legislative briefing document like we did last year, or we could create a brand new briefing document if you felt that neither one of those two are where you want to go. And so I'm looking for a little direction. We have 2 items that I think are going to be very important to my legislative briefings, both federally and state. The first is the economic study from the Regional Planning Council, so that will be in our package, and I will be approaching Mike Boucher to see if we've got enough hard copy, and if we don't, I may be coming back for a request for some funding to help print some more of those. The second is our annual report, but I do think your position statement is both effective, strong, clear, but it doesn't wind up in the details of how appropriations and appropriation decisions are going to work during this session. So if you ask my opinion, I would say, start with that position statement. If you want us to modify slightly, we're happy to do so. But I need some direction on that before the session starts.
Ed?
Wait, just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I like where we're at. I think I think the stars are aligned politically from one end of the lagoon to the other and statewide. I think we've got the horses in the barn politically to get this done from what I've heard from the people I've talked to. I think what we've prepared in the past is spot on. Nothing's changed. I think it's been well thought out, well crafted from all of our offices, from all of our input, from the districts to the counties, to the cities. I like where we're at, and I think we just put the pedal to metal and go.
Thank you, sir. Richard?
I just have a question. Are you going to go for specific appropriations from the next Florida legislature?
My advice as your executive director is the answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Last year we were very effective because we just supported our member requests, the LBRs. And so each of your local municipalities are going to the state with a request for funding. Amy Adams told you the challenging process that's coming, this new approach in the House. And so last year what I did when I was asked, it was very general, that we support our partner agencies in their budget requests. We support the governor's budget, and we support our local partners in their legislative requests as they support the lagoon, and we don't actually get into specific project recommendations or recommending one county's list of projects over another. If it supports the lagoon, we support that group of projects and trust that the legislature and the governor will appropriate the dollars necessary to do the job. So we've kept it quite general. I think that's a reasonable place for us to be in this process, and we respect this kind of network governance model where each of you, representing different layers of government, have different constraints on how you approach, especially the state legislature.
A follow-up question. Thank you for that answer. These legislative delegation meetings, do you plan on coming, or are we going to present what we just talked about? Or
this year we're going to have some difficulty. Staff starting tonight, in fact, Frank Sakuma is in here because he's already in meetings in New Orleans for the federal level. We're meeting with all the NEPs at the Restore American Estuaries Conference, and I will be presenting Monday. So we'll be meeting with the NEP directors through the weekend, and we have a symposium on the Indian River Lagoon on Monday. And so I'm going to miss a few of those early delegation meetings, but what I found last year is because of that position, all I need to know is what the requests are. So, and I work with county and city staff, and Representative Coy made a comment that I think is important. Even in the shift, of leadership on council, it has been my intent and will continue to be to reach to every city we can to make sure we're engaged with all 45 cities along the lagoon. We're doing that through the leagues of cities, but I'm doing it as much as I can individually. So if there are Indian River Lagoon requests, either within cities or within counties, if I know what that LBR position is, then I am much better to respond if I get asked a specific question in Tallahassee. And I can assure you, I get asked some very specific questions when I'm walking around the hallways there. So, but our official approach is going to be, if it supports the lagoon, and you're having to make a decision on what to fund the ones that have the best return on investment to water quality, habitat quality, and lagoon health, and then we leave them to do their job.
The other thing that was mentioned was the report that was done, and I think, Barbara, the regional planning councils worked with you in accomplishing that, and that report was extremely useful, very concise, it was quite colorful, very attractive, very informative, but limited. We don't have enough of them. I had one. So I don't know if that's something that y'all are anticipating making more available, or what?
They do have it on the website of the RPC. Rent a copy, but we don't have any funding.
You don't have any money for it?
I'm tempted, Mr. Chair, to ask for, authority to go ahead and support printing, but we have a meeting coming up before the session. I'm going to talk to Mike Boucher to see, how many he has, whether there's any additional funds there. And to be perfectly honest, I think there may be an opportunity to get some private sector to support, to push that printing out. And so before we appropriate dollars kind of out of sequence, I'm going to find out what the need is, find out how many we need to print, and then see where we are, and I'll report back to you at our
Well, and
next
it may
meeting.
well be something that we want to have in stock.
I think we need to have hard
Extremely useful
copy.
information.
As much as I'd like to think that everybody's going to go on the website and pull that down, I can tell you that a lot of us older folks still like to have that printed copy in hand. I think we have 10 or 20 left. They are a hot commodity, and people want them. They want to see them at events, and so I think we need to extend that publication, hard publication, beyond what we have.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Two thoughts. One, because it is an economic development proposal or showing the value of the lagoon, I would suggest reaching out to the economic development councils along the lagoon and asking for support, financial support to print them, and even maybe provide some of those for each of those entities for distribution. I think it bodes well that, there's a lot of businesses along the lagoon that are profiting because of it, and economic development is part of the process, and we've made it very clear that showing the economic value beyond the tree hugger mentality and the environmentalist mentality, that this is an economic issue. So that'd be my first suggestion. The second, from a legislative standpoint, it's been reported that an individual legislator along the lagoon has indicated a willingness to put together a lagoon coalition. And that said, I would suggest that if the committees are looking for a place to basically be the, place to talk about the lagoon and issues that are coming for funding, that might be a place where you could insert yourself as what I would call our lagoon expert, to provide any assistance in making those decisions as to even what projects would return the most value to the legislature's investment in our communities along the lagoon. So I would just make that as a
We'll make
thought
that
process.
happen. I'm already talking with St. Johns River Water Management District, the intergovernmental staff, and we're trying to set up a meeting before Christmas with the lead on that caucus, to see how that's going to proceed, and to make sure that we're fully engaged with members of the legislature if that caucus actually comes to fruition, because I think that'll be an important communication of, factual information, and, and we need to get the word out about what we're doing. So there's still a lot of, in this transition, people want to know, what have you done? And so that's going to be part of my message in Tallahassee and Washington, of not just our accomplishments, but what's coming up this next year. So we'll do that.
Caucus would help us. I think we're ready to move to 8E.
Okay, item number 8, I will turn to our legal counsel regarding the next step in process on leadership at the council.
This is just a quick update. As you may recall, you are required each year to adopt officers, and the election of those officers occurs in January. There's an item coming up after this. As you may recall from your adoption of your meeting schedule, you'll likely not meet in January, so we would do that in February. So this is both a warning not to miss the February meetings. I think the last time we did that, Commissioner Zadowski was reappointed to serve in his position when he was absent. But we will do that in February, so perhaps if there's any interest in anyone who wants to put their name in the hat, one way you can do that is reach out to Dwayne or staff and let them know in advance if you have any questions about what those positions entail. And then when we come in February, just be prepared to go ahead and have elections for officers.
All righty. Thank you, ma'am. We're ready for 9?
Yes, 9, just quick, you have a briefing document for the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan revision process. There is a very detailed checklist from EPA on how that process moves forward. I give it to you for information only. We had the beginning of a discussion on not only how we're going to approach the new CCMP, but we've asked the Management Board and the STEM AC to start giving us kind of the expectations, and we threw a few on the table. It's got to be actionable. There have to be projects attached. It needs to be science-based. And so as you have thoughts on how you might like to see this new Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan, please share them with me. Just call directly. I have this vision in my head. I don't know how we're going to quite get there, where this plan will meet the obligation of the EPA in format, but also is the kind of plan that each of the counties and each of the cities can see where their parts are within the plan. And so I'm not ready to bring anything to you yet. We're working on the structural component, but by the end of, let's say, our next management board / STEM AC meeting, you know, I want clear path. It is my hope, and I'm being told that this is not possible, but it is my hope that we can finish a draft CCMP in its complete form, maybe not full public review finish, but it'll be all on the website in 18 months. And that's about half the time that most of these NEPs take to do a CCMP. We're going to fast track this. Item number 2 is actually related to that. We had our first meeting on our 5-year program evaluation from the EPA. This is a very serious and very important program evaluation, because if you don't pass it, you don't get any money from the feds through the National Estuary Program. And we had a great meeting with EPA staff, headquarters. Great news. Part of this alliance, Holly, over at Tampa Bay, has agreed to actually serve. So Holly Greening will actually be on the team giving us guidance and EPA guidance as an ex officio member who has already gone through both the 5-year and the CCMP. So with a big step forward, and lots of thanks to headquarters. My concern was that, you know, we're looking back 4 years at a structural program that no longer exists and having to be aligned with a CCMP that very shortly won't exist. And so I called Ann Shortell, or actually she called me. We were talking on another subject at the St. Johns River Water Management District, and she assured me that whatever we need from the district for that first 4 years, we will have. So they're going to support us in rolling that data up. But the big move forward is that the headquarters has agreed to allow us to connect that 5-year review to the CCMP that we're working on now, that we can focus on the future. And as long as we meet the obligations of the checklist of information, so it will be a 5-year review, but it's not going to be focused looking back on how we complied with old instructions. It's going to be how we're moving us forward in process. And that, they didn't have to give us that kind of leeway. I'm super glad they did. And so now this process, which is going to be hundreds of staff hours, I can tell you this is no small feat. The report has to be in March. March 1 is our deadline. In fact, March 1 is our deadline for our preliminary budget and work plan. They will come down from headquarters in July, and what they have asked at headquarters and regional, so Jennifer DeMeo, is they want to meet with us, you, the management conference. And so the way we're going to do those field meetings is in the field. So we're going to try to set something up with you all, and if we have to publicly notice, we will, but we're going to look at some projects, in the field and on a boat, and not do it in here in a room. So headquarters and EPA understand the work that's being done on the ground, and that you get to meet those individuals from headquarters and regional in this support. So that's the upcoming, review process. So March 1 deadline, July, we'll get those dates to you early on once we figure out what that field trip. I think we'll probably do 1 day in the northern sector, kind of work our way down, give them good representation on how big this system is and how complicated. So I'm really encouraged there. And the last is just a heads up. As you all know, I've been working with Harris Corporation in a reverse technology ask. The news that Harris joined us in the Innovator and Investor Group it's gotten around, and I had a phone call 3 weeks ago from 4 engineers from Northrop Grumman who were directed to us by one of the senior executives at Northrop Grumman, who I happen to work with on the board for CareerSource Florida, the board of directors, both governor appointees. And he said, I've got a team of engineers that want to do something, and I want to steer them towards the lagoon. So as of last week, we have 1 Harris engineer, all graduate students, by the way, 4 Northrop Grumman engineers who are going to do this capstone project They have to put about 100 hours each in, and they're going to evaluate from a business standpoint our assets to do oyster restoration and oyster farming. So Florida Oceanographic Society, Harbor Branch, Marine Discovery Center, Marine Resources Council, Brevard Zoo, with these kinds of questions. And I'm working directly with these students, so they're not biologists. I said, I don't want the biology lens. Figure out how we can capitalize and actually make this a self-sustaining delivery system. And so they're going to look at supply-demand side chain, the chain for oyster shell. Do we have enough to do the restoration we need? Brevard County has done an estimate using methodology. They're predicting a 20-mile oyster reef restoration that was based on this idea that you'd turn water over, 100% of turnover in 1 year. So we'll apply the same methodology in all 5 counties as just a base protocol. And they're going to talk to each of our partners at each of those areas, see where their needs are, see where their economic limitations are, and actually develop kind of a gap analysis and a future opportunity analysis on the business model of centers or hubs of restoration along the lagoon. Last budget cycle, we actually bailed out 2 of those partners because they simply didn't have money to continue shuck and share. Where I hope this goes, if I'm thinking correctly, and we'll know when the data comes in, is that I believe that we need to move to a clear path for restoration centers where we start to look for recurring dollars, not just for oyster, but other filter feeders, seagrass. At some point, and we know living shorelines will come on board, but this will give us a methodology where we could take what these students do, and if it works for us, move it over and say, now let's look at living shorelines, or let's look at seagrass and see if there's a model that is business-oriented and engineering, flow-through based. So I'm excited. I have no idea where it's going to go. They're going to get graded on it, not by me, but they're all doing this work at University of Florida. And so I'm giving everybody heads up to give them as much data as possible. And we'll bring these students back to you, as well as what I'm doing at Harris Corporation at some point, so you can see where this crazy aviation and aerospace connection is already starting to provide really good value to us. So I just wanted to let you know that this innovator investor group is being populated by external interest without me going out and kind of twisting arms to come join us. It's a very exciting time. And that's all I have, unless there's questions.
Yes, sir, there is.
Mr. Chair, I would only add in that James Oppenborn works on a shoestring in St. Lucie County, and he has a significant program, and quite honestly, he probably gets $300,000 of volunteer hours to create those living shorelines and those oyster bed restoration projects. FDEP has recognized the Wildcat Cove restoration project as highly successful. So from a data collection standpoint, and maybe even pointing them in that direction, from a business standpoint, we are seeing seagrass restoration that's occurring around those oyster bed restoration projects as well. And we're doing mid-tidal oyster restoration as an experiment, if you will. And so those are opportunities that we have in St. Lucie County that we would be pleased to offer as a place to review information.
No, that's great. My big fear is that, like building a building, if you don't have the drywall and the bricks ready to go, then when you're ready to build, you don't have the dry goods to actually move that forward. So I'm kind of looking at a long projection of, how many cubic meters of oyster shell do we actually need? And if we can actually get more than we need, can we sell them on the open market to Virginia and North Carolina, who are actually buying oyster shell right now at huge cost to their programs? And so I think, and James is on my list, I'm going to try to get them to talk to everybody in the sector and then see what looks like the logical business model so that we don't have people working on a shoestring from project to project or moment to moment. And I think with the oyster farming, that small grants program we talked about earlier, that could be a real value added where people are looking to put a couple of bags on a dock, need $200 or $300 to get the goods to do it. And so just as one other point, I'm also connecting them with the commercial shellfish industry. that I want to see if we can help them, you know, move as a supply chain for live oysters. We've talked about it with Brevard County. Virginia and I have been in a number of meetings. So we'll see where this goes as a science project, but I'm excited about the possibilities. And there is no fiscal impact to us other than some guidance on the supervisory side. And that's all I have for today.
Other questions, comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Yulovich, please, sir. Yes, sir.
If you recall, previously I had suggested for your consideration that since several of these items are items that were discussed yesterday at the management and STEM meetings, that you may want to hear about these type of matters before you have discussions on them. That's your discretion. I'm going to go quickly over the discussions we had yesterday, which basically were reiterated to a large degree today. You heard about Herb Hiller. We talked about that. Chris turned him on to the Richard Berker Preserve on 10 Mile Creek, an area he did not know about as a potential site, and we asked the members present to, if they know of these type of things that he's not tuned into, to actively get with Herb on that. So actually I told him get a hold with Mike Middlebrook and Amy. Okay.
Perfect.
As you might expect, when the Flushing matter came up, there was jump out of seat responses from some people. But in the end, we concluded, and very well, the general consensus of yesterday's meeting is exactly what you all are saying today, that matters that come forth before you should be duly vetted amongst the management board and the STEM. That's why we're there. So the conclusion on the Flushing was we realized that this had potential, okay? And that we left that dialogue with an understanding that that project and other projects like that will be fully vetted by the STEM, by the other agencies, and through the management board before we come to you. That you should not have to look at you shouldn't have to look at things half full or half evaluated. That's our job to do that. In that same regard, when we took the financial records off of the consent because we feel a responsibility that when you address a financial matter, that we should be looking at that. And the role of the Finance Advisory Committee was clarified in regards to Joel Zwimmer on the Finance Advisory Committee will be the linchpin to Frank. So when we're talking about financial matters, and later on we're talking about contract amendments, we're talking about audit things, he's going to be the linchpin that's going to come back to the management board, and he's going to say, I talked with Frank, things are okay, and we move forward, and we come forward with you, or you have assurances that somebody is looking or counting the chickens in the hen house, all right? So in minutes, we talked about unfinished business. Dwayne had mentioned it. You know, we're desperately looking for FDOT membership on the management board. The Finance Advisory Committee, they're desperately looking for a role clarification in that regards. And a lot of people were pointed to the document, whereas it has roles laid out and there to address any inclusions or exclusions. We talk about regional representation, off-cycle funding opportunities, and identification pollution source. This is all old business to us that we have unfinished from the management board. In regards to the FEA, while there was general approval, there was dissension on there, and everybody was in support of it. But you know, the dissent was in specific regards to the comments that were made by his counsel, whereas Drew expressed concerns about becoming involved in other efforts at the expense of the NEP, legitimately so. And Ed Fielding noted, as staff is overextended, we should withdraw. So the dissenting opinions on that were a reflection of everything you hear that's going on. We weren't opposed, the dissent were not opposed to joining, but thought the timing of joining could be changed, okay? So when we talked about the boundary amendment, you know, the STEM was the first to say we need to do a boundary amendment after the Volusia stuff, and then when they were asked for a volunteer, nobody volunteered, so Dwayne said, I'll do it. Now, highly unlikely this will ever occur again. You know, my recommendation right now is, you know, I don't want Dwayne spending his time doing something that has a minimal chance of ever happening again. So my advice and my suggestion is forget about it, Dwayne.
Hey, Bob?
Yes.
We actually got a volunteer after the fact, and so I do have a number of volunteers, and Lisa Soto from MRC jumped in, kind of built a little bit of a team. So this will get done with volunteers, so I don't have to do it.
Right, the mansion conference policy, the codification, everybody was, like I've said to you all in the past, encourage you all, and they were all encouraged to look at what roles that they feel that they need to be involved in or not involved in. We went through the solicitation process on Kathy was very helpful in identifying where the funding. We did hit some bumps in the revised scope of work for the Marine Resource Council. There was discussion about a 55% increase to a contract, okay? And the return on that contract for that investment. What are you getting for that $25,000 bump? There was questions raised by Joel from the Finance Advisory Committee about data rights. Just the kind of the questions that we would expect to have, so that when we come up to you and say, this is cool, okay? So that also had sending votes on it. It was not approved unanimously. So, I mean, I feel we're doing our job to vet and make sure that things, and oftentimes, it's not in a, I've apologized. I tell Dwayne, I apologize if you feel I'm myopically managing, but I'm not going to apologize for that as well, because we have that responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility for these public funds. As previously I noted, we had discussions about the clarification that Drew's going to get into relative to the positioning of this agency or this special district relative to funding. I listened to Drew, and Water Management District is a special district by law. This is a special district by law, so I think you may have some manipulation in there. We did add a couple items, and Sherry was there, and Sherry is like the linchpin for dispersed water management, or what they call in St. John's dispersed water storage projects. So I just talked briefly about the ones that are going on, how they can possibly be linked into the work that stormwater feasibility to Bill Tredick's doing, and other things, how we can look at this. And as Drew said, we got pieces here, pieces here, pieces here, so we're trying to bring it together. We talked briefly about the economic evaluation report that I would love to go see Mike Busha, and everybody wanted a copy, but we didn't have any, okay? And then Tom Carey brought up an issue from Volusia County about recent events after Matthew with derelict vessels. So it was a good discussion in that regards. In member issues, Lisa had priced out a very excellent brochure in reference to Lagoon that she's done at the Marine Council. And when someone asked me about how the meeting went, I said we got done a half hour early and we had a half hour lunch. It was good. That's it. Questions? We good? Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Please.
Chuck Jacoby, the chair of your STEM Advisory Committee, and from St. John's Water Management District. I won't go through a lot of details. I think Bob covered most of the details of the discussions. I will say that for the STEM AC, this was our second meeting, and we're looking to gain traction as we move forward. Our primary focus will be helping to drive the CCMP revision forward, but as we heard today and yesterday, we're picking up a lot of other things to do. There's some short-term things, such as providing this guidance on boundaries. There are also things like the flushing issue, reviewing the flushing pilot project, as well as now joining in on the assessment. But I'll add one major thing that I think we have to do in the sort of medium term, and I think it addresses a lot of Bob's concerns about process, and that is obviously the structure has changed, and so the process I think needs to change as well. Certainly from my standpoint, a big part of my job is to drive the science that people here can use as the base for their deliberations, and that process needs to change. We need to build a different set of relationships than we've had in the past, and that's something that I think the STEM AC needs to be involved in. Or as I've been told, you are driving the boat. So in the future, we'll be talking with you a lot more about what kinds of things might need to happen in and around the lagoon. That's all I have.
Last comment? No. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, please.
Just for the record, we have an amazing volunteer management conference that is large, diverse, incredibly smart, And you just saw our two chairs from the STEM AC and the management board, both Chuck and Bob, fully engaged. And so that level of engagement is exactly what we want. I had somebody after the meeting say, "Are you and Bob getting along?" You know, and I said, "Yeah, we're getting along fine." I mean, those kinds of discussions, they may be a little edgy, but that's exactly the level of discrimination that we need to have if we're going to move this forward to get the best product we can. So I'm encouraging everybody. You got to go in there open-minded, vocal. You know, we'll have the tough discussion, and hopefully we come out with a consensus. We may not all agree all the time, but I think we are going to have a much better product on the end game, you know, if we are honestly having that discussion. So thank you to not only all those volunteers, but I wanted to thank the council as well. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, have a wonderful holiday season, and then we'll give you a brief on what's going on in New Orleans at our next meeting, because that's where we're headed this afternoon.
We're pulling this thing together here on item 11. Are there any member reports or comments that you'd like to make?
To the last item, I think it's important that we have sometimes dissenting opinions. Groupthink is never always the best possible way to approach an issue, especially when you have a lot of opinions, and in this case, a lot of science, a lot of pockets in which we have to pick for money to get projects done. So I'd rather have someone say very clearly to me they have an issue with whatever it is I'm bringing up, and I think I even said it way back when we were still in the South Florida, in the St. John's building, that if anybody on this board thought that I was going to be a rubber stamp, I would suggest differently. So that's my first point, and thank you for each of you and the entire volunteer group of each of those committees. The next one is that we do have a lot of appointees, and I would like, if you wouldn't mind, Dwayne or Kathy or Frank, getting with me on my appointees, because I've had people come and go, and I think I still have some open positions, so I'd like to make sure I get those filled for you so that you have representation from St. Lucie County. Couple of points. Wesley's Island, again, thank you for the commitment to Wesley's Island. That was processed recently. That renovation and reclamation project is really going very, very well. The community has bought into it amazingly, and we're very appreciative. And we're going to see great results out of that. The hurricane actually helped us with some of the stuff too, so that was pretty interesting. We still have some shoreline issues, so talking about erosion, that'll be a challenge going forward too because of where it's located. One sad note, Friends of the Spoil Island, their island, Ezra Appel's adopted island, was vandalized recently, and it's pretty substantial. The signage that talks about all the funding partners and so on and so forth was broken out, and a lot of trash and a lot of things were beaten up on the island. So I hope that whenever we do create our education components, we talk about the value of these islands and we get people to buy in and encourage the public to participate by, if they see people vandalizing these spoil islands, to report it. It's a criminal act. And so we need to have the public engaged in basically policing those spoil islands. And last two comments, we talked about the Becker Preserve. We expect to be able to do a ribbon cutting in the Becker Preserve very soon. An agenda item was in there today about reconnecting the oxbow at the Becker Preserve. That will substantially help the discharge from 10 Mile Creek Reservoir and in that basin. So that's something we're continuing to look for from an Environmental Resources Department and our water quality side. And lastly, the Indian Hills Stormwater Project, that has been over 8 years. It was the first thing I did in my first action as a commissioner, and all of the funding partners from FDEP, the South Florida Water Management, the Issues team, Amy Adams, who worked so diligently in helping us to bring all those together. It's an amazing project, and we are removing thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of contaminants from the system. And not only are we doing that from a functional standpoint, it is one of the most beautiful venues in which to take a walk, learn about how stormwater is interacting there. We'll continue to make the education components. And the Savannah access, Savannah Preserve access into the savannas with boat launches, kayak launches, and parking, impervious parking is amazing. The wetlands that have been reconnected. And again, that's what, a part of what the NEP is able to accomplish. And so I'm hoping to see some of those in the report as successful opportunities. You know, in the news, we all obviously always hear about the negative and rather than the positive. But through the negative comes the positive. So I'm appreciative of both sides of that. But I just wanted to congratulate this National Estuary Program Council and the funding partners for the wonderful things that are happening. And I'll just share for in St. Lucie County, because each of you can take credit of your own. But St. Lucie County and its constituents and residents and visitors are very appreciative of what we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Others that wish to make comment? Yes, sir, please.
So a couple of follow-ups on the committee report outs. I do think it's probably prudent to move the management board and STEM committees up on the agenda before the, you know, particularly if they've added an agenda item that we have, I'd like to hear from them. I think that would be good just to make, if I hear someone else has already deliberated and come to a conclusion, then I don't have to do it personally, you know. And the other, you know, the finance committee that we formed, and I seem to recall, and my memory isn't what it used to be, but I seem to recall when we were forming that finance committee, the focus was to figure out better ways to leverage council resources into private donations and other kinds of things, and we were looking at staffing it with folks along those lines. I don't think it was formed as a watchdog or you know, a finances auditing type committee. I think we have auditors, or maybe there's a subcommittee. I don't know, but I just want to make sure that we are in the right swim lanes with that committee itself. Maybe it's shifted to more of a watchdog committee, but it's a memory thing, and I don't have all my documents when we put it together. So if we could just look into that and make sure that we're still on our what we're supposed to do.
We'll take a look at that, and what we decided at the meeting was that we'll meet with that subcommittee in advance. So they'll actually be the first part of the management board meeting, where Frank will actually brief them specifically on where the budget is. That group is, you know, kind of more in the accounting side with their expertise, but we've got a lot of people in the management board with financial capabilities, and I agree that one area we need some additional support, and I'm not sure we've got the right mix yet, is in that private philanthropical, you know, area. So we'll look at that and, you know, make sure that we're in our lane.
All right.
They were encouraged to look at the draft codification and to exclude items that they didn't feel were pertinent, perhaps include. Okay, so your comment, you know, goes back to the record thing where we said there are opportunities out there to get additional funding through different sources, and that's clearly still been attempted.
Okay.
But, you know, we listened to the board, and the board also wants some fiduciary in it.
There were two.
That's fine.
There were two thrusts.
Like I said, my memory isn't what it used to be.
There were two thrusts.
But the third thing, honestly, is I think Commissioner Daniels, is this your last meeting?
Yes, it is.
So that's here's a founding member that without whom we probably, you know, wouldn't have been as successful, because he brought such a great demeanor and encouragement for this commission, and I just definitely wanted to make sure we recognize his contribution, and I know I'm certainly going to miss him.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for those kind words, and if you would pass them along to the people in Volusia County, that'd be terrific. I really have enjoyed serving on this board. It's been one of the things that has made being on the county council worthwhile. You know, I think it has done terrific things. It's made terrific progress. And I agree with you on the committee reports. You know, we've got these committees. If we could have them give their opinions on those specific issues, then we don't have to talk about them or beat them around so long. Which brings me to the, you know, the idea that we could dramatically shorten the meetings. You know, which is always good. It's always good to have shorter meetings, and you know, we do have a lot of administrative things that we have straightened out over the time, but I think that what we've gotten in the habit of is getting a little bit too far down in the administrative weeds, to having to approve everything. I mean, every little thing, and we shouldn't, you really need to do that. I mean, we decided long ago that Indian River County could come in if Indian River County did certain things. Well, of course, we're gonna draft up an agreement that includes Indian River County. I mean, why would we need to approve that? I mean, that type of thing that we can begin to shorten the meetings, listen to what our committees have been doing. Otherwise, they're going to not want to attend anymore. They're not going to want to be a member of the committee if we're not going to listen to them, if they're not going to have an impact. All that being said, this is a terrific organization. I wish it all the success in the world in the future, and I think it will have. I think we got the right executive director, and I think this group is going to go someplace, that we are going to actually be able to raise the money we need to raise to actually get some things done. I was glad to be president at the beginning. Thank you.
Good job. Any other comments? We do have a decision to make on item 12. January the 13th is an optional meeting. The next meeting will be February the 10th. So we might have some, yes ma'am, Ms. Nancy, did you have something you'd like to, Dwayne, do you have anything you'd like to make? So this is, we've got some flexibility here. Do we have any suggestions? Do we see that the 12th, 13th, January the 13th, do we see some essence? Are we going to accomplish something with that meeting that's
Mr. Chair, what I'd recommend, if you decide to not meet at that optional meeting, that we would be engaged with you individually as staff with a deeper preparation, because that February meeting would be a workshop. And so it's scheduled kind of in advance as a kind of a budget work plan workshop, and that we would begin to give you those detailed information of where we're headed, expecting that you're going to give us individual feedback. So when we go into that workshop, we are, moving quickly along, because we will have a March deadline to have that, that work plan draft and our preliminary budget draft completed.
So there is some urgency to some follow-through outcome. So February is going to be a fairly intense, and so we need to be well prepared for that. All I'm saying is, are we willing to recognize that February is going to be quite an important meeting, as we've got to meet a deadline? And then how do we want to address January? Do we hear a motion so that we cancel January and that our next meeting is February 10th? Is that a motion?
Mr. Chairman, move that we cancel the January meeting and reconvene in February and have staff ensure significant time is set aside for each participant of the NEC, so that we can manage our time appropriately for what sounds to be a lengthy meeting.
We have a second to that, please? Second. Been moved and seconded. That was Commissioner Smith. Is there further discussion? Should there be comment from audience? Is there anyone that would vote no on this motion? It's taken unanimously. We're going to adjourn. Our next meeting is February the 10th